Story 1. My narcissistic mom wore a white dress to an Indian wedding thinking she'd upstage my beautiful bride. But she looked ugly and was embarrassed the entire time. I don't have a good relationship with my mother because she was the type to demand gifts on my birthday because I wouldn't be here without her. For 18 years, I never got to open presents myself. Every event, from my games to graduation, was always about her. I always felt like my life and achievements were just an extension of her accomplishments. I think I suppressed my resentment because everyone around me always acted like this was normal. I didn't know how to cope with this, so I just tried to get as far away from her as possible. I applied to the furthest university I could realistically get in and stayed far away because anytime I had to go back home, it was the same story. At university, I was lucky enough to meet Pia. And for the first time, I started to like who I was. I didn't feel like I had to hide or play down my accomplishments or even my failures. And her family was so warm and welcoming. It felt like my childhood was just a nightmare of the past. I thought the best way to move past it was to just move ahead. I was ashamed of my mother's behavior and the ugliness of my resentment. So, I pretended everything was fine and invited my parents to my wedding with Pia. I actually had a really clear vision of what I wanted in the wedding. Just an event that would be about me and not my mother. These suppressed feelings led to me unfairly lashing out at Pia when my mother tried her old tricks and asked to wear white to our wedding. At that moment, I forgot white wasn't the bridal color in Indian weddings. I just felt a cold sweat that another precious moment would be hijacked by my mother. Pia and I got into a fight about her letting my mother wear white, but she said it was okay because there was no way a simple white dress was going to outdo her wedding look. And for a while, everything was fine until unwanted memories kept invading my head. No matter how much I tried to bury my head in work or exhaust myself by exercising, they always came back. I ended up having an actual meltdown that night. I was sobbing and crying. It was probably my ugliest moment. The next morning, I half expected to wake up alone and get a text that the wedding was off. Instead, incredibly, Pia stayed with me. She convinced me to go to therapy, encouraged me through those first few hellish sessions, and gave me space when I needed it. Therapy really helped. I was able to understand why I was feeling angry and upset and how to deal with it beyond just trying to ignore it. I apologized to Pia earlier, but it let me actually be honest with her about my family. It really transformed our relationship. I took over the wedding preparation with the help of my in-laws, and I got to actually design my dream wedding. My mother-in-law later told me she was really relieved that we switched because my lovely Pia didn't really care about the colors or flowers and had virtually no input on any of it as long as we were getting married. My mother-in-law was also very encouraging and patient in letting me voice my input. The actual wedding went really beautifully. Pia was ready to rescind my parents' invitations completely after everything, but her terrifying little sister suggested we invite them anyway as a final sort of foo to show them I wasn't alone anymore. And no matter what they tried this time, things would go my way. I have to admit that did appeal to me. So we decided to invite them for the third day of the ceremony. And it worked even better than I imagined. First, it helped that my mother had no real idea what an Indian wedding is like. So, when she showed up in a long white tulle ball gown, security actually thought she had the wrong address and didn't let her in. This was actually something I didn't plan. But I felt such joy seeing my mother fuming by the gate while other guests were let in. Compared to the embroidered silks and sleek satins of Indian clothes, this was something I didn't plan. But perhaps it was the most symbolic moment of my life. There she was, standing on the sidewalk, arms crossed, eyes full of anger and shame. The same woman who spent years saying I owed everything to her. Who made sure to remind me on every birthday that she was the one who gave me life. Who ruined my childhood by turning every occasion into her personal show. Who cried loudly at my victories and made scenes at my defeats. Now she was outside, blocked by security, and for the first time without control of the narrative. For the first time, she had no stage. And me? I felt free. Of course, part of me still felt that knot in my stomach as if something terrible was about to happen at any moment. A conditioned reflex from years of living on alert. But Pia's gaze, serene and confident, her hand holding mine, and the guests laughing and being enchanted by the ceremony. All of this pulled me into the present. For the first time, I didn't need to give in. I didn't need to explain. I didn't need to keep the peace. When they finally allowed her entry, more at my father's insistence, who seemed uncomfortable and embarrassed, she entered alone, walking like a pillar of salt in the middle of a vibrant party. People stared, of course, not for the glamour she imagined she would have, but for the almost comical way she clashed with everything around her. She tried to smile, forced, tried to greet some people, was ignored. Nobody knew who she was, and the few who did weren't interested. She sat in the back alone and stayed there watching. I watched her shrink gradually. The haughtiness wilted as the rituals progressed. What had been a woman who insisted on being the center of attention transformed right before my eyes into a shadow. An ordinary woman, someone who no longer had dominion over my space. Pia didn't even look at her, not once. And that, I think, hurt more than any confrontation. There was no argument, no scene. There was only silence and indifference. After the ceremony, when I approached her to greet my father, she tried to stand with that old martyr look, as if she had been a victim of all that. But before she could say anything, Pia appeared beside me, holding my arm with a sincere smile, and said something simple. "Do you want to come with us to the family dinner, or would you prefer to rest?" My mother froze because in that moment, she realized that Pia wasn't asking her. She was asking me, and I, for the first time, chose without fear. "I prefer to go with you alone." She wanted to say something but swallowed it. My father just nodded like someone who finally accepted that he could no longer keep up appearances. At that dinner, I laughed like I hadn't laughed in years. I was moved when Pia's father made a toast saying that a new son was entering the family. And I cried discreetly when her grandmother handed me a traditional necklace and said it represented protection and belonging. Meanwhile, my mother must have been at the hotel in some over-decorated room removing her smeared makeup, trying to understand how she lost control, how she lost her son. But the truth is she never had it. She only had the reflection of guilt she imposed on me for so long. And that day, finally, I broke the mirror. The next morning, I woke up with a peace I had never felt before. Pia was still sleeping, the sheet covering half her face and a gentle smile at the corner of her lips. The sun came through the hotel window, and for a moment, I almost doubted that all of it was real. I picked up my phone, and that's when I saw missed calls from my mother, 11. One after another, all between 3 o'clock and 5 o'clock in the morning. A message from her, too. Long, confused, passive-aggressive. It said she was humiliated, that she didn't deserve that I had chosen strangers instead of my own mother, that Pia's family was manipulative, that I was being bewitched by a woman who only wanted to distance me from her. I took a deep breath and deleted everything without reading to the end. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty for doing this. For the first time, I realized how much that woman had drained my energy for years with these emotional games. At breakfast, Pia noticed my silence but didn't ask. She just held my hand under the table as if to say, "You don't have to carry this alone anymore." It was only the next day, when we were already organizing our honeymoon trip, that my father called. I answered out of politeness and perhaps because I still held a sliver of hope that he at least would have some lucidity. "Hi, Dad." "Son, your mother is devastated." Started like that. Not a "how are you?" Not a congratulations on the wedding, but a direct emotional appeal to the usual weak spot, guilt. She spent the night awake. Said you humiliated her. "Dad," I interrupted calmly. "She showed up at an Indian wedding dressed as a bride." "Who humiliated whom?" Silence. Then, "You know how she is." Yes, I knew. And so did he. That was the problem. Everyone knew and nobody ever did anything. "Yes, Dad. I know exactly how she is. And that's why it's going to be different now." He tried to insist, wanted lunch to talk things over better, but I refused. I said I was tired, that I had a new life to take care of now, and that if they ever wanted to see me, they would have to come unarmed, without manipulation, without emotional blackmail. I never thought I would have the courage to say that, but I did, and I hung up. In the following days, Pia and I flew to southern India. We hiked, drank tea at plantations high in the mountains, and watched the sunset at ancient temples. For the first time in my life, I felt whole. But it was enough to open Instagram to see that my mother hadn't gotten over it. She had posted a photo from the wedding in which she barely appeared with the caption, "Sometimes even the mother is an invisible guest, but it's okay. A mother's love is silent." The comments were quite a show. Distant aunts, her friends, people who had never even congratulated me, commenting broken hearts and phrases like, "You deserve more. One day he'll realize what he lost." I was about to respond, but Pia held my hand and said, "Don't waste energy on that. Life is here, not there." And she was right. What my mother lost that night was more than the chance to show off. It was the chance to truly participate in my happiness. But maybe she never knew how to do that. And this time I wasn't going to teach her anymore. When we returned from our honeymoon, I found a letter in the mailbox, handwritten with my mother's unmistakable handwriting. She never liked to write, thought everything could be resolved with raised voices and face-to-face drama. But there it was, using the last card in the deck, the pen. The letter began with false tenderness. It said she hoped I was well, that she wished the trip had been pleasant, but soon slid into bitterness. "It was cruel of you to treat me like an intruder. A mother should never be barred from her own son's wedding. Are you ashamed of me? Is that it?" Yes, that was it. But I wasn't going to answer. Worse than the letter were the visits. The following Saturday around 10 o'clock in the morning, the intercom rang. It was her. Without warning, without invitation. Pia was in a nightgown in the kitchen, preparing coffee, when I heard my mother's voice downstairs demanding they open the gate. She told the doorman she was my mother and had the right to enter. I had to go down. I went down with my heart racing, not from fear, but from a cold anger that pierced my chest. She was standing there in sunglasses, smeared makeup, and a scarf thrown over her shoulders as if she were the widow of a living son. "You don't answer my calls. Don't respond to my messages. I'm here because I deserve an explanation," she said. "Mom, this isn't the time or place for this. I gave you life and this is how you treat me? A woman my age on the street like anyone else. Yes, because that's how you treated me my whole life, like anyone else on the stage of your vanity. And now the stage is closed. Accept it." She tried to cry, forced tears, but her face didn't move with emotion like before. It was a rehearsed performance, almost pathetic. "That woman," she began, referring to Pia, "she turned you against me. No, she brought me closer to myself, to my identity, to my right to be happy without having to carry you on my back. She stared at me as if I were a stranger. And maybe I was, because for the first time I was speaking like a man, not like the cornered boy she raised through manipulation. "You're ungrateful," she said, her voice failing. "And you'll regret it. If I regret it, at least it will be my choice." I turned my back and went in. I didn't run. I didn't tremble. I just took a deep breath and closed the gate behind me. For the first time, I had the power to end the scene. Upstairs, Pia didn't ask anything. She just hugged me. From that day on, I understood that my mother wasn't going to change, that she would use every possible emotional resource to maintain control. Guilt, drama, victimization, even third-party opinions. And the worst part, she would start spreading lies. And that's exactly what she did. The following week, I discovered she had called all my uncles, making up stories that Pia was manipulating me, that I had fought with her for no reason at the wedding, and that she was publicly humiliated by a whim. Even my old childhood soccer coach, who was never close to her, sent me a message asking if everything was okay. What she didn't expect was that now I had a voice. For the first time, I explained, I showed who she was with facts, with years of forced silence and emotional submission. Some were shocked, others feigned surprise, but almost everyone thanked me for speaking up. A cousin told me, "I thought it was strange how she took the microphone and everything, even at your graduation, but I thought it was just her way." No, it wasn't just her way. It was emotional abuse disguised as love, and the disguise fell. The disguise fell, and with it, the image of the exemplary mother that she had sustained for decades in front of the family also fell. I didn't need to make a scene. I didn't need to curse. It was enough to expose calmly what I had lived through. I told how she demanded that my birthdays be about her. How she played the victim when I won an award or was called on stage. how she asked for money even when I barely had enough to feed myself at university. All with that air that I owed her this for having brought me into the world. It was liberating, but the price came. She disappeared for a while. No calls, no messages. My uncles started sending me cryptic messages. Give her some time. She's in a bad way. She's your mother, man. Deep down, she loves you. Pia stood by my side in each of these conversations. She reminded me that being a mother can't be an eternal shield for abuse, that I didn't need to accept being hurt just to keep the peace. But what angered me most was what came next. I received a notification that my name had been included in an estate proceeding, something my grandfather had left, apparently a vacation house. Nothing major, except that in the paperwork it stated that I had abandoned the family and therefore was giving up the part that belonged to me. She tried to disinherit me using manipulated documents. I investigated. I discovered she had lied to the lawyer, saying I refused to have contact with any relatives, that I was psychologically unstable, and that I had verbally assaulted my own mother in public on my wedding day. She wanted to erase me, cross me out, and the worst part, she almost succeeded. If I hadn't noticed that notification in time, I would have unknowingly signed a false waiver. And you know what she said when I confronted her by phone? I only did this to see if you cared. I laughed, a dry laugh without humor. Then, congratulations, Mom. Now you know I care about my dignity, about my peace, about my family. The one I chose, not the one that manipulates me. You're going to cut me out of your life because of a piece of paper? She screamed. It's not because of a piece of paper. It's because of the whole life you threw in the mud, pretending you loved me while feeding off my suffering. And I hung up. She tried to call me 6 more times that day, then another 15 the next day. Pia blocked her number from the cell phone. I did the same, and then silence for months. No calls, no notes, no attempts to reappear at the building door. It was strange at first, as if I had amputated something that had always been there, even though it hurt me. But gradually, I felt relief take the place of the weight. Gradually, I returned to living. I started cooking with Pia on Sundays. We made plans to adopt a dog. We traveled by car through the countryside and stopped in small towns, eating at restaurants that didn't even have printed menus. I laughed. I slept better. I gained 3 kilograms. Rare for me, who had always been too anxious to eat properly. And then, one ordinary afternoon, I received an anonymous letter. No return address, but with her handwriting inside, a childhood photo of me. I was about 5 years old. I was dressed as a superhero at a birthday party I didn't even remember anymore. And on the back of the photo, a sentence written in black pen. One day you'll miss me. For the first time, I didn't cry. For the first time, I just looked at that photo and realized that day in that costume I was already just an extra in her theater. And today I am the protagonist of my story. I kept the photo not out of attachment, but as a reminder of how much I lost myself trying to be the ideal son of a woman who never wanted a son. She just wanted a mirror. A reminder that love that sells itself as sacrifice, but imposes itself as eternal debt, isn't love. It's possession. Months passed. I moved on. Life finally was light. Pia and I moved to a quieter neighborhood further from the big city with a garden and morning sun. We planted lavender and rosemary by the window. She started giving online dance classes to children, and I got a position as coordinator of a social project with young people from the periphery, the kind of work that fulfills, that doesn't exhaust. That's when we discovered Pia was pregnant. I cried in the bathroom, lying on the rug, sobbing softly, from joy, but also from fear. A silent fear that came from deep down. What if I became her? What if, without meaning to, I projected my past onto this child? Pia noticed. Of course she noticed. You're going to be the father you never had, she said, touching her forehead to mine. And I promised I would. That I would be. That my child would never have to compete with my ego. That he would never hear, "You owe me everything." That he would never be an instrument of blackmail, of vanity, of neediness disguised as protection. The pregnancy brought us even closer. We set up the room together, painted the wall grayish blue. We bought second-hand furniture and refurbished everything with paint, patience, and laughter. Pia said every scratch had a story, and I, for the first time, believed we were writing a new one. In the 8th month, my mother tried to reappear. She sent a message from a new number. "I heard you're going to be a father. Congratulations. I hope your child is more grateful than you were." It was like a weak sting, a poison that no longer had any effect. This time I didn't respond. I didn't delete it either. I just left it there as proof that she was still the same, that there was no remorse, no regret, just hurt and self-indulgence. The day our son was born, Pia was luminous. Tired, yes, but with a glow that made the hospital room seem like a sacred temple. When I held him in my arms, he cried loudly, so loudly that I laughed through my tears. He had lungs. He had strength. He had life. "You've arrived," I whispered, "and I'm going to protect you from everything that hurt me." The following week, we received flowers at the hospital. No card, no name, just a golden ribbon with the words, "For the grandson who will love me one day." Pia wanted to throw them away immediately. I asked her to leave them. I want to remember that even without her around, she still tries to put her claws in. But he'll never know this, Pia. Never. We raised our son with love, but also with vigilance over the inherited traits from the past. And every time I saw in him the sparkle in his eyes, the light curiosity, the simple joy, I knew the cycle had been broken. Did my mother try to be part of it? Yes. She sent gifts on birthdays, tried to approach through my in-laws, even through the director of the little school where he was enrolled, always with the same litany. "I'm the grandmother. I have rights." But she never understood that rights are earned with love, not with manipulation. Today, he's 5 years old, and when he hugs me, saying, "You're the best dad in the world," I don't fill with pride. I fill with peace because I know he says it with freedom. Because I know that if one day he feels angry with me, he'll be able to say it. Because I'm raising a son, not a mirror. And about my mother, she's still there somewhere in the city trying to maintain control of a game that no longer exists. She lost me, and contrary to what she wrote on the back of that photo, I don't miss her because missing someone presupposes having had something real. And what she gave me was just a performance. The years passed, and with them came confirmation of everything I already knew, but only time could prove. Her silence was the greatest liberation of my life. Today, our son is 9 years old. A smart, generous boy full of questions about everything. Sometimes he surprises me with the depth of his observations, and I think he's growing up free without the weight of having to represent anything other than who he is, and that's all I ever wanted. He calls me Dad, but he also calls me to play, to cry, to share secrets. We're close, but he knows he has space, that he doesn't need to please me to be loved. Pia and I made a silent pact to create a home where everyone feels safe to be imperfect. What I built with her is so different from everything I lived through that sometimes it seems like a dream, but it's real. A light marriage without manipulations, without emotional blackmail, without that constant fear of saying the wrong thing. We argue, of course, but with respect and, above all, with freedom. My mother is still distant. I learned from a cousin that she's been saying around that she lost her son to a foreigner and that he thinks he's superior now because he went to college. Her stories change according to the audience, but the narrative is always the same. The misunderstood martyr. She never saw her grandson and he doesn't know her name. Maybe one day when he's older, he'll ask and I'll tell the truth without hatred, without revenge, just the truth. Because hiding pain doesn't prevent it from returning. It only makes it harder to identify when it appears. Pia taught me this. Therapy reinforced it and parenthood sealed it. The other day, riding bikes with my son, he fell, scraped his knee, and cried loudly. I ran to him, cleaned the wound, and he hugged me tight, saying, "I thought you were going to be mad because I ruined the ride." I looked into his eyes and answered, "Son, no fall ruins a day with you. We just stop, take care of it, and move forward together." In that instant, I was certain the cycle was broken. And even though her voice deep in my memory still tries to whisper that I'm ungrateful, cruel, or cold, I learned to respond with silence. A firm silence. A silence that protects. Today, I don't need to prove anything anymore. Not to her, not to anyone. Because finally, I am the author of my own story. And she, for the first time, isn't on any of the pages. Now on to the next story. Story 2. My girlfriend asked for space and told me not to contact her. Then she went on vacation with her ex. My girlfriend, I need space. Don't contact me for a while. Then she posted photos of vacationing with her ex. I respected her wishes, changed the locks, and sold her car that was in my name. When she returned, her key didn't work, and her parking spot was empty. I suppose I should start from the beginning. It's still a sensitive topic. I'm not going to lie. About 3 weeks ago, my girlfriend, Emily F., dropped a bombshell via text message. We had been together for almost 2 years, living together in my apartment for the past year. Things felt good. Maybe a little distant lately, but nothing alarming. Or so I thought. The message came on a random Tuesday night. While I was preparing dinner, Emily wrote, "Things feel complicated, and I really need some space to think, to sort things out. Don't contact me for a while, please. I'll let you know when I'm ready." A low blow. Space is never good. But okay. Trying to be the understanding boyfriend, I replied, "Okay, Emily, I understand. Take the time you need." I didn't hear anything else. Complete silence. But isn't that what she asked for, right? So I respected it. I cleaned the apartment for a couple of days. Confused, hurt, wondering what she meant by complicated. Work was a welcome distraction. Then Friday night came. Bored, scrolling through Instagram, and there it was. A mutual friend had tagged Emily in a post. Photos, bright sunshine, beach cocktails. Emily looking incredibly happy, arm in arm with Jordan M. Her ex, the one she swore was ancient history, with the caption, "Living our best life. Island getaway. Reunited." My blood froze. Space to think meant a tropical vacation with her ex-boyfriend while asking me not to contact her. The pain transformed into something else. A cold, hard clarity. She didn't just want space. She wanted me out of the way while she tested her old relationship, keeping me as a backup plan in my own apartment, using my resources while explicitly telling me to leave her alone. Fine. You want space? You want no contact? Granted. The next morning, locks first. I called a locksmith, changed the deadbolt, and the door lock of my apartment. Cost about $250. Worth every penny for peace of mind. Her key was now useless. The car. This requires context. About 6 months ago, Emily's old clunker finally died. She needed a reliable car for her job, social media marketing, lots of client meetings apparently, but her credit wasn't very good. I agreed to help. I bought a Mazda CX-5 used but quite decent, around $18,000. Crucially, the loan, title, and insurance are all exclusively in my name. The understanding was that she would make payments to me, which she mostly did, and that it would be her car to use, but legally it was 100% mine. I never added her to the title or insurance. She treated it as hers. She decorated it with fuzzy dice, the usual. I took the spare key I always kept, drove to a trusted nearby dealership that buys used cars, and briefly explained the situation. "I need to sell it. I am the registered owner." They gave it a quick look. They offered a fair initial market estimate around $16,500, pending a full inspection and title verification. I agreed to proceed and signed the initial paperwork to start the process. They said it would take a few business days to complete the inspection, finalize the offer, and handle the title transfer. I left the car there and took an Uber back. Her assigned parking spot in the apartment complex, empty. Her things, I hadn't touched them yet. They're still in the spare bedroom closet. I'm not throwing them out. That would feel petty. But she wasn't going to get back into my apartment without talking to me, which she specifically asked me not to do. I felt strangely calm, like performing necessary surgery. Hurt? Yes, deeply. I felt like a complete idiot. But anger wasn't the main driver. It was logic. She requested space and no contact. She demonstrated that the relationship was over by going on vacation with her ex. I was simply respecting her request and protecting my assets and home. Now I wait. According to Instagram, The best life vacation lasts another week. Let's see what happens when she returns and her key doesn't work. Update 1. Well, she's back. The show happened last Tuesday at 9 p.m. I, Ryan, was watching some TV, trying to ignore the knot in my stomach. I heard keys jingling outside the door. Then the sound of a key in the lock. Silence. More scraping, now frantic. Then knocking. Knock. 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 Ryan, what's going on? Open the door. Emily's voice was annoyed, not yet scared. I took a deep breath, opened the door just a crack, and kept the chain on. There she was with her suitcase beside her, tanned and annoyed. My key doesn't work. What happened to the lock? I changed it, I said in a calm voice, level blinks. What? Why would you do that? You asked for space and no contact, Emily. I gave it to you permanently. What are you talking about? I just needed some time. You can't just lock me out. I saw the vacation photos with Jordan. Looks like you've already sorted things out. Her face went from annoyed to furious, with a flash of short panic. Emily, that was just a trip. It didn't mean anything. We're friends. I raised an eyebrow. Friends who go on romantic island getaways while asking their current boyfriend for space. Understood. Ryan, don't be ridiculous. Let me in. My things are in there. Where's my car? Her eyes drifted to the empty parking spot. Where is my car, Ryan? Arrogance radiated from her. The pure assumption that everything would still be waiting for her. First, it's my apartment. Second, it was never your car. It's my car, legally in my name, and I'm selling it now. It's at the dealership. Her jaw dropped. You're selling it? You can't do that. I paid for that car. You made payments toward its use, Emily. You didn't buy it. The title and loan are in my name. The selling process has begun. This is crazy. You're stealing from me. I'm going to call the police. She pulled out her phone. I just shrugged. Go ahead, call them. Explain that your ex-boyfriend changed the locks to his own apartment after you asked for no contact and went on vacation with another ex. Explain that he's selling his own car, titled and registered exclusively in his name. Let me know how that goes. She hesitated, phone halfway to her ear. Then her expression turned venomous. Emily, you're a horrible person. You planned this. You planned a vacation with your ex and asked me for silence. I respected your wishes and you faced the consequences. You have no right to keep me on hold in my own home. Suddenly, another voice, her sister, Brooke F. She must have been waiting in the car downstairs. She walked up the path. Brooke, what's going on? Emily? Ryan, why have you left her outside? Emily resorted to tears in front of her sister. He changed the locks. He's selling my car. He's kicking me out. Brooke turned against me. Are you kidding? After everything she's done for you, you just kick her out and sell her things? It's my apartment, Brooke. And it was my car. She asked for no contact and went on vacation with Jordan. Check her Instagram. We're done here. She needed space. You're supposed to support her, not punish her. Support her while she cheats on me? No thanks. She made her choice. Now she can live with it. Emily began demanding her things right now at 9 o'clock sharp. How? Not tonight. Can you arrange a schedule to pick up your belongings? Text me a date and time. I'll have them packed by the door. You won't come past the foyer. You can't dictate. I can. My apartment. My rules. Now you want no contact? This is the new contact arrangement. Text me the time. Goodbye. I closed the door and locked the deadbolt. My hands were shaking. Adrenaline, anger, residual pain, but mostly relief. It was over. The confrontation was over for now. I heard them outside for another 5 minutes. Emily yelling, Brooke trying to calm her while probably fanning the flames. Then they left. A few hours later, I received a message, not from Emily, but from Brooke's phone. Brooke's text. Emily needs her things tomorrow at 10 sharp. Be ready. No, please. No, thank you. Just pure demand. I replied, fine. I spent the next few hours packing up stuff. Clothing, toiletries, books, knickknacks, everything I could find. Piled it all near the door. It was cathartic. The dealership called later that week, maybe Thursday, and said the inspection was done. The final offer was firm at $16,350. A small adjustment for tire wear. I went there Friday afternoon, signed the final title transfer documents, and was handed the check. I deposited it immediately. Felt like I was closing an expensive and emotionally draining chapter. Let's see what tomorrow brings. Collection day. Expecting more drama. Update 2. The last week has been something else. The entitlement levels keep rising. It's almost impressive. The collection was at 10 o'clock sharp, Wednesday, as scheduled in the previous update. There was a knock on the door. It wasn't Emily. It was Brooke and her mother, Karen. Emily was waiting in the car, apparently too upset to face me. Sure. Karen immediately started, tears in her eyes. Crocodile tears, I suspect. Ryan, how could you do this to her? After 2 years. She loves you. Apparently not enough to avoid going on vacation with her ex while asking me for space. Karen, it was a mistake. She was confused. You should forgive her. And selling her car. That was cruel. She needs it for work. It was my car, Karen. Legally mine. And her confusion led her to betray our relationship. Actions have consequences. The car is sold. I opened the door more to show the boxes stacked in the foyer. Here are her things. Take it all. Make sure you take it all because this is the only chance. Karen sneered. We need to check the closets, the bathroom. You can't just give what's in the foyer. I packed everything I could find. You won't be coming further into my apartment. Don't be irrational, Ryan. And if I forgot something, then that's too bad. You can stay here or I'll stay here and you take the boxes. That's the deal. Clearly, they wanted to push their way in, maybe argue more, maybe find something valuable of Emily's they could claim I was keeping. Not going to happen. They muttered under their breath, but they started loading boxes. Took them 3 trips. Meanwhile, Karen went on with a monologue about how insensitive I was, how Emily was devastated, and how I owed her compensation for the car. I just stood there, didn't respond much, and repeated, "It was my car," like a broken record. The financial demands and the smear campaign followed. Once they left, the messages began. Now mainly from Emily, alternating between tearful apologies. I miss you. I made a huge mistake. Take me back. And furious demands. You owe me for the car. That was my money. I'll take you to small claims court. I ignored the emotional messages. For the demands, I sent one. Emily. The car was legally mine. The title, the loan, the insurance, all in my name. Your contributions were toward use during the period you used it. Consider it as rent. No further discussion. Then I blocked her number. Blocked Brooke. Blocked Karen. But it didn't stop. Suddenly, some mutual friends started contacting me. People I knew mostly through Emily. Their tone was accusatory. Dude, I heard what you did to Emily. That was pretty cold. Selling her car like that. They were clearly being told a convenient story, painting me as the villain who kicked her out and took her car out of spite, conveniently leaving out the part about the vacation with Jordan, I'm sure. I briefly explained the situation, her text, the vacation with the ex, the car legally mine. To a couple of them I thought might be reasonable. Mixed results. Some got it. Others clearly bought her narrative. Whatever. People believe what they want. A dirty attempt then came via a call from my landlord's office yesterday. Apparently, they received an anonymous complaint about recent disturbances and loud arguments coming from the vicinity of my unit. They claimed there was shouting and concern about confrontations. My blood froze for 1 second. This seemed calculated, trying to get me in trouble. Luckily, I have a good relationship with the building manager. I explained calmly. My ex-girlfriend, who lived here but wasn't on the lease, recently moved out after a breakup. There was a brief loud argument outside my door when she discovered I changed the locks after her request for no contact and subsequent action. Her family was also here briefly for a supervised collection of her belongings. There have been no disturbances inside my unit, and she no longer lives here. The manager seemed understanding. Said they would note it, but unless there were more verifiable complaints or actual disturbances, it wouldn't go anywhere. I'm pretty sure it was Emily or Brooke trying to cause trouble. Low blow, the X factor. I received a message request on Instagram from Jordan. I didn't even open it. I just deleted and blocked. I don't need or want to hear anything from him. Probably gloating or trying to stir things up. My response? Honestly, all these entitlements and dirty tricks just solidify my decision. They don't make me feel guilty. They make me feel justified. This isn't just a mistake Emily made. It's who she is and who her enablers are, Brooke and Karen. The revenge isn't some grand plan. It's simply letting them crash against the wall of reality. Apartment secure. Lease is just mine. The complaint didn't go anywhere. Car sold. Money in my account, legally airtight. Her stuff gone. Communication blocked on all channels. Any future attempt at contact, especially threats, will go straight to a lawyer for a cease and desist order. I already briefly consulted with one just to be sure. They confirmed my position on the car and apartment is solid. The constant demands, the victim narrative, the attempt to mess with my housing. It's disappointing. Do they really think they can bully and manipulate their way back to the comfortable situation Emily ruined? Newsflash. It doesn't work that way. Now I'm just focusing on cleaning up the emotional mess. It's hard to realize that the person you lived with and cared about is capable of this level of deception and entitlement, but better to know now. Update 3. It's been about 2 months since Emily returned from her little space-finding trip with Jordan. Things have calmed down, mainly because I refused to engage with the drama after that last update. I wanted to share the final resolution. The smear campaign continued for a while. I lost some superficial mutual friends who bought Emily's story. Honestly, good riddance. Anyone who takes her side without hearing the full story isn't someone I need in my life. Anyway, my true friends, those who knew me before Emily, were supportive, listened to my version, saw the flagrant disregard, and backed me 100%. Emily apparently tried to escalate things legally. I received a vaguely threatening letter from some cheap lawyer she probably had to scrape funds to pay, demanding $10,000 for the value of her contributions to the car and emotional distress. It was full of typos and legal nonsense. My response was to have the lawyer I consulted send a very formal and concise letter. It included 1. Copies of the car title, loan agreement, and insurance policy, all exclusively in my name. 2. A reminder that her contributions were for use/depreciation during the time she drove it, basically rent, and she actually owed money if calculated by mileage according to standard rates. A bluff, but it made the point. 3. A copy of her original text. I need space. Don't contact me. 4. Screenshots of the vacation photos with Jordan, a public post with a timestamp. 5. A warning that any further unfounded claims or harassment would result in me seeking legal fees and filing a restraining order based on her previous attempts to cause trouble with my landlord. Complete silence after that. Her cheap lawyer probably told her she had no case and dropped her. Paying for a real legal battle was never an option for her, especially without my financial support. I heard through the grapevine, a friend who still has minimal contact with one of Emily's less intense friends, what happened after. Emily stayed with Brooke for a while, which apparently caused huge friction because Emily expected Brooke to basically finance her life and didn't lift a finger. Shocking. Jordan predictably disappeared once the vacation ended and reality set in. He wasn't interested in supporting her or dealing with her drama long term. He had his fun trip. End of story. She apparently tried to emotionally blackmail her parents/Karen for money, probably with some success, but they couldn't afford her former lifestyle indefinitely. Last I heard, she had to move back to her hometown, living with her parents again, apparently constantly complaining about how unfair life is and how I ruined everything for her. Zero self-awareness, zero remorse, just pure entitlement and victim mentality. The best part? The sweet, sweet sound of silence. No more demands, no more drama, no more Emily. My apartment feels like mine again. In fact, I painted the living room last weekend and got rid of some of the furniture she chose. The space feels good. The revenge wasn't loud or explosive. It was quiet and methodical. It was simply respecting her request for no contact and letting the logical consequences of her actions play out fully. She wanted space. She got an infinite amount of it. She prioritized a fling with her ex. She had to deal with the consequences alone. She took my support, car, and apartment for granted. She lost them as soon as she broke the trust upon which they were built. Selling the car she thought was hers, the car that was her status symbol, while literally tanning with another guy. Yes, okay, that part really did feel satisfying, I'm not gonna lie. And that empty parking spot when she returned? Chef's kiss. That's the consequence hitting hard and visibly. She didn't just lose a boyfriend. She lost the comfortable life she assumed was her right, funded by me. Did it cost me emotionally? Yes. It took time to process the betrayal, but I handled it logically. I protected myself and refused to be a doormat. She thought she could play games, keep me hanging. She miscalculated badly. She faced the inevitable direct consequences of her own choices, and her arrogance couldn't protect her. That's the most satisfying outcome I could ask for. Good riddance, Emily. Time to move on. Really. Now on to the next story. Story 3. My feminist sister literally tied up a guy at a party and claimed she did nothing wrong. So he and I joined forces to press charges against her. My sister is a stereotypical third-wave feminist who says she believes in equality but, in practice, believes women should have more power than men. She's the type who never cooks or does laundry but expects her boyfriend to do all the handyman work, drive her everywhere, and treat her like a princess. She ended her last relationship because her boyfriend asked her to make him lunch, since he had overslept and was getting ready for work with no time to cook. She took this as a huge insult, claiming he was sexist for expecting her to handle household chores. I knew the guy and he was far from being like that. Additionally, my sister loves getting into debates about feminism and we often argue about it. One of her main arguments is that she expects her partner to pay for everything. She justifies this by saying she's disadvantaged and can't get a job because she's a woman, ignoring the fact that she's always late for interviews. A few months ago, we had a major fight after she read an article about consent. The article stated that if a man has relations with a drunk woman, it's abuse. Many might agree with that, but the article went further. It claimed that even if both are drunk, it's still abuse. It argued that a woman can never give consent if she's under the influence of alcohol. For men, this wouldn't apply because they're physically stronger and could resist. I thought this was exaggerated, but my sister thought the article was perfect, which led to a heated argument. During the fight, she even accused me of being sexist and said I should feel lucky she didn't accuse me of something that happened years ago with an ex-girlfriend, which was completely absurd. After that, I ended the conversation. Since then, she's firmly believed that men can't be victims of abuse because they're physically stronger. At the same time, she developed a crush on a guy from her class and talked about him frequently. He seemed to be her type and a nice guy. I encouraged her to approach him, but she said she was nervous and that women don't make the first move because that's a man's role. When I asked about equality, she said it was different. Last week, my sister found out that he was also going to a party she planned to attend, and she was excited. The party happened a few days later and she came home the next morning with a slight hangover. Later, I asked how the party went. She told me she hooked up with the guy. I was happy for her and asked for more details, but what I heard made me concerned. She said that after a few drinks, she finally had the courage to talk to him and they got along well. Things escalated, but at some point she lost sight of him and started looking for him. She eventually found him in a room visibly drunk. He was still conscious but very disoriented and barely responsive. Instead of helping him, my sister decided to take advantage of the situation. She told me she initiated something more intimate with him and helped him feel better in a way you can imagine, even though she noticed he wasn't fully aware. When she told me this, she said she didn't see anything wrong with it. I was shocked and explained that what she did was wrong because he wasn't in a state to give consent, something she herself strongly advocates for. She insisted that women can't be accused of crimes against men because only the opposite is recognized, and that if anyone was harmed, it was her since she was also a bit drunk, even though he was far worse. I told her what she did was wrong and that I didn't want to talk to her for a while. That night, I reached out to the guy on social media to check if he was okay. He knew I was her brother and we started talking. He told me he felt very uncomfortable with what happened and was deeply shaken. I shared how my sister talked about the situation and he was horrified by how she handled it. I asked if he wanted to take action, and he said he was considering legal steps because, although he initially liked her, in that state he didn't want any interaction. He was hesitant due to fear of not being taken seriously. I supported him and encouraged him to act. In the end, he decided to seek legal advice and asked for my help in sharing what my sister said and how she reacted. I agreed, and now he's consulting with lawyers. I agreed, and now he's speaking with lawyers. I thought that over time my sister would realize the gravity of what she had done. But no. She continued acting as if nothing had happened. She walked around the house with that air of superiority, as if she were above any judgment. When I mentioned that the guy was about to press charges against her, she laughed. She laughed. Are you serious? Who's going to believe that? Women don't do that kind of thing. Who's going to take him seriously, especially against me? That sentence hit me like a punch to the stomach. How could someone be so arrogant? Her confidence didn't come from knowing right or wrong, but from the certainty that society would protect her. Days passed and, with my help, the guy filed a formal complaint. He was determined, although visibly nervous. We knew it would be difficult, but we also knew that this couldn't go unpunished. When my sister received the summons, her expression finally changed. For the first time, I saw a trace of insecurity. But as always, she quickly regained her composure. That's when things started spiraling out of control. She made a point to publicize the complaint on social media before any official information was released. She posted a text full of distortions, claiming she was the victim of a sexist persecution. Her narrative was that the guy regretted being with her and, to avoid feeling guilty, decided to accuse her of a crime. And me? I was the traitor, the brother who was supposed to support her but, according to her, was helping to destroy our own family. Within days, her post went viral. Feminist groups started sharing her story, claiming she was yet another woman being silenced by men. Soon, posters with phrases like, "Justice for her," and "No means no," even for them began circulating online. And it didn't stop there. They started attacking me. They found my photos, exposed my social media profiles, and spread lies. They said I had always been sexist, that I always mistreated my sister, and that I was taking advantage of the situation to humiliate her. I received threats and pain messages from people I didn't even know. At first, I thought about staying quiet, but I realized that staying silent only gave more room for lies. If they wanted war, they would get it. I recorded a video. I sat in front of the camera, looked directly into it, and spoke the truth. My name is Thomas. I'm Lawrence's brother. You've heard a lot about me these past few days, and now I'm going to tell you the truth. My sister is not a victim. She committed a crime. She took advantage of someone vulnerable and is now trying to flip the situation. I helped her when she needed it. I was always by her side. But I cannot support a crime. If you want equality, then you need to understand that a crime is a crime no matter who commits it. If the situation were reversed, everyone would be demanding justice. So why is it different now? I was direct. No sugarcoating. I didn't apologize. I wasn't polite. I was real. Within hours, the video went viral. Unlike what I had imagined, many people began to open their eyes. Comments like, "If we want equality, we must demand justice in every case." And, "If it were a man, he'd already be in jail. Why is she different?" started appearing. Some radical feminists kept attacking me, but the tide began to turn. People started questioning my sister's narrative. Influencers talked about the case and the story spread. And then came the day of the hearing. My sister walked into the courtroom with her lawyers by her side and a look of contempt. She still believed she would walk out of there as a victim. But the facts spoke louder. The guy's testimony was powerful. I also testified, telling exactly what she had told me. The prosecution presented the messages, her social media posts, everything. The judge didn't hesitate. She was found guilty. She received a light sentence, but enough to bruise her ego. She was arrested. I thought that would be the end of it, but it wasn't. Protests in the streets grew. Feminist groups began demonstrating, claiming she was a victim of a patriarchal system. They said she was being used as an example to silence women. Banners with absurd phrases, screams of outrage. They even tried to storm the courthouse during one of the hearings. But the worst came from my own family. My parents sided with her. They said I had destroyed the family, that I had exposed my sister to humiliation. My mother cried, saying I had ruined her daughter's life. My father, in silence, just shook his head in disapproval. That's when I realized they never cared about the truth, only about what was convenient. I decided to cut ties with them. I don't regret it. I kept speaking out. I gave interviews and joined debates. I talked about how misinterpreted feminism can cover up crimes and distort the fight for equality. I showed that justice must be for everyone. Today, my sister is serving her sentence. The protests have faded and voices gone quiet. Many of those who attacked me in the beginning now stay silent or pretend they never criticized me. And me? I hold my head high. I did nothing but fight for what was right. If they want equality, they must embrace it fully. Justice has no gender. After everything that happened, I feel like I need to express everything I think. It's not easy to talk about this, especially because it involves my own family. My sister, Lawrence, has always been very vocal about feminist issues. And let me be clear, I have never been against a fight for equality. I truly believe that men and women should have the same rights, the same opportunities, and be equally respected. The problem starts when that fight becomes distorted, when the pursuit of equality turns into an excuse to justify selfish, abusive, and even criminal behavior. The truth is, my sister has always used feminist discourse as a shield to hide her own flaws. It was always convenient for her to say she couldn't get a job because she was a woman when, in reality, she was late for every interview. It was always easy for her to complain that men were privileged while she expected her boyfriend to pay for everything, do all the heavy lifting, drive her wherever she wanted, and treat her like a princess. For her, equality only existed when it was about receiving benefits, never about taking responsibility. And unfortunately, my sister is not an isolated case. There are many people like her, women who want to demand everything from men but aren't willing to give up anything, who want equality only when it suits them but run from any consequences when they're wrong. That's not feminism. That's disguised selfishness. It's wanting rights without accepting responsibilities. Lawrence always had ready-made speeches about female empowerment, but in practice her actions were contradictory. She claimed that women should be independent but never made an effort to be. She always expected the men around her to do everything for her. She never cooked, never cleaned up her own mess, but demanded that her boyfriend fix any problem in the house, drive her wherever she wanted, and pay all the bills. Whenever someone pointed out this inconsistency, she would immediately lash out, saying she was tired of the patriarchal oppression and that it was her right to be treated like a queen. I always watched these attitudes with discomfort, but as her brother, I tried to let it go. I thought it was immaturity, that she was still finding herself. What happened with Daniel was the last straw. She crossed the line, and even then she refused to see the seriousness of what she had done. She preferred to hide behind rehearsed speeches, preferred to paint herself as a victim. She said it was impossible for a woman to harm a man in that way, as if she were biologically incapable of committing a crime. And the worst part? A lot of people believed her. But Daniel was the victim. He trusted her, was vulnerable, and she took advantage of that. And I don't regret helping him for even a second, because what happened to him was real. It was serious and it needed to be taken seriously. It didn't matter who the aggressor or the victim was. What mattered was the truth. And the truth is that he suffered at the hands of my own sister. People called me a traitor, said I destroyed my family. But you know what would have been betrayal? Staying silent, turning a blind eye to what happened just because it was my sister who did it. Blindly supporting someone who committed a crime just because we share the same blood. That would be betraying my principles, my integrity. I chose to stay true to what I believe. I believe in justice above all, and justice must be equal for everyone. If it had been Daniel who did this to my sister, he would have been behind bars from day one, and no one would be protesting to defend him. No one would be making excuses for him, saying he didn't mean it. So why should it be any different for her? I know a lot of people still defend my sister, thinking she was wronged. I can't change everyone's mind, and I don't want to, but I can speak my truth. I can show that there is indeed a double standard when it comes to justice between men and women, that many times men are discredited or silenced while women are protected at all costs, even when they are wrong. I'm not saying all women are like this. I'm not saying feminism is something bad. The problem is when this fair and necessary fight is hijacked by people who only want personal gain, when it's used as an excuse for abuse, for humiliation, to commit crimes and walk away unpunished. I hope that one day my sister reflects on all of this, that she realizes no one is above consequences. Maybe that day will never come. Maybe she will continue to play the victim for the rest of her life. But I know I did what was right, and that's enough for me. Life goes on. Daniel is now trying to rebuild his life, and I truly hope he succeeds. He didn't deserve to go through this. And if my sister was punished, it's because she chose that path. She had every chance to act differently, to behave with respect, but she preferred to believe she was above everything. I have no regrets. If I could go back in time, I would do it all again because justice has no gender. Because being a man doesn't mean you have to stay silent, and being a woman doesn't give you a free pass to do whatever you want. That's my opinion, and I will keep defending it, because if equality is what everyone wants, then let it be complete. Justice for all. Now on to the next story. Story 4. Stop being so dramatic. My mom yelled as I clutched my chest. I was 19, sitting on the living room floor. And for a second I thought, maybe she was right. Maybe I was being dramatic. My vision was blurry, my heart hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. And my brother sat on the couch rolling his eyes like I was putting on a show for him. He just wants attention, he said flatly, scrolling through his phone. You always do this when people are finally having a good day. I wanted to yell at him, but it was like my voice got stuck halfway out of my throat. I remember staring at the carpet and thinking, if this is attention-seeking, why can't I breathe? My name is Evan, and I've always been the sensitive one in my family. At least that's what they called me. My brother Mason is the golden child. Varsity soccer, top of his class, everybody's favorite. My parents live for bragging about him to their friends. I'm the one who got told to toughen up when I cried over my first breakup and got grounded for being lazy when I was working late shifts at the grocery store and overslept the next morning. It was a Saturday afternoon, and we were supposed to be celebrating Mason getting accepted to his dream university. My parents threw a little party with family and neighbors. Cake, barbecue, the whole deal. I had spent the morning helping set up tables and carrying drinks outside. But when I went to grab a plate for myself, my dad told me to let Mason eat first. He's the reason we're all here. So, I waited until the line cleared, sat down on the couch with my plate, and tried to stay out of the way. Then it happened. This weird, crushing pressure in my chest. I thought maybe it was just anxiety, since being in the middle of a celebration where no one seemed to notice I existed wasn't exactly relaxing. But the pain didn't stop. It got sharper, deeper, like someone had wrapped a belt around my ribs and was pulling tighter every second. "Mom," I managed to say, putting my plate down on the coffee table. "I think something's wrong." She barely looked up from her conversation with one of the neighbors. "What now, Evan?" she sighed. "I can't breathe right," I said, my voice shaking. That's when she snapped. "You're fine. You've been fine all day. Stop making everything about you. This is Mason's day." I don't know what scared me more, the pain or the fact that no one seemed to believe me. Mason actually laughed under his breath and said something about me being theatrical. I stumbled to the hallway clutching my chest and sat down because I thought I was going to pass out. My aunt finally noticed something was wrong and asked if I was okay. I couldn't even answer her. My hands were shaking and sweat was running down my face. She crouched down, touched my forehead, and yelled for someone to call an ambulance. My mom rolled her eyes but grabbed her phone anyway. When the paramedics arrived 5 minutes later, one of them knelt in front of me and checked my pulse. His face went pale instantly. "Get the stretcher," he shouted to his partner. And just like that, the entire room went silent. I could feel everyone's eyes on me as they strapped me onto the stretcher. My mom standing frozen by the doorway. Mason holding his phone like he didn't know what to do. My heart was still racing, but now there was something else boiling inside me. Anger. That was the first time I realized how alone I really was in my own family. And as they wheeled me out the front door with half the neighborhood watching, all I could think was that I never wanted to feel this powerless again. The hospital kept me overnight for observation. Turned out it wasn't just anxiety. Like my mom insisted, I had a heart arrhythmia that made my pulse shoot dangerously high. The doctor told me I was lucky someone had called when they did. If I'd passed out and gone untreated for too long, it could have been much worse. I expected my parents to be worried when they came to pick me up the next morning. Maybe even a little apologetic. Instead, my mom walked into the room holding a paper cup of coffee like this was just a minor inconvenience. "Well," she said, glancing at her watch, "at least Mason's party wasn't completely ruined. Your aunt kept everyone entertained." I just stared at her waiting for something. Anything that sounded like concern. My dad didn't say much either. Just asked the doctor how much the ambulance ride was going to cost. On the drive home, Mason was in the back seat with me, tapping away on his phone, probably texting his friends about how dramatic I'd been. My mom turned to me at a red light and said, "You really have to stop scaring people like that. Evan, do you know how stressful it was for me to make sure the food didn't go cold while the paramedics were in our living room? I started, but my throat tightened up. I could have died," I finally said. She glanced at me through the rearview mirror. "Well, you didn't, so maybe next time don't overreact and make everyone panic. You embarrassed yourself and us." I felt my jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Mason snickered softly. When we got home, I thought I could at least relax, but my dad immediately told me to help clean up the backyard from yesterday. "You're fine now," he said, handing me a trash bag. No excuses. I was still dizzy from the medication they'd given me at the hospital, but I picked up plastic cups and plates anyway, just to avoid another argument. Every time I sat down to catch my breath, my mom would pop her head out the back door and say, "Don't just sit there. Evan, you didn't do much yesterday. Make yourself useful." That night, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. "He has to toughen up," my dad said. "If he acts like this in the real world, he's never going to make it. And we can't keep dealing with his health scares," my mom replied. "They're draining. Mason doesn't give us this kind of trouble." I remember lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, my chest still sore, and wondering how I had ended up as the family's punching bag. It wasn't just that they didn't care. It was that they seemed annoyed that I'd scared them. The days that followed felt worse than the arrhythmia itself. My mom started telling relatives the whole thing was just a panic attack and that I played it up for attention. I heard her say it to my grandmother over the phone. Mason backed her up every time, laughing about how I collapsed because Mason got more attention. The worst was the next weekend. We had another family dinner. Apparently, my near-death experience hadn't slowed down their social calendar. When I got up from the table because I was feeling lightheaded, Mason said loudly, "Careful, guys. Evan might pass out again." Everyone laughed. I froze in the doorway. "Don't be so sensitive," my dad said when he saw my face. "He's just joking." But it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like a warning that no matter what happened to me, it would always be treated like a punchline. I started spending less time at home after that. I'd stay late at work, sit in my car at the park just to avoid walking through the front door. The more I pulled away, the more comments I got about being selfish or ungrateful. My mom said I was trying to make them feel guilty by staying out. I wasn't. Not yet, anyway. But somewhere deep down, I was starting to think about what it would take to make them realize I wasn't just the family's emotional punching bag. The breaking point came a few weeks later on a night that should have been simple and quiet. I'd just come home from a late shift at the grocery store. It was close to midnight and my chest was aching from standing on my feet all day. I walked into the kitchen to grab a glass of water only to find my mom, dad, and Mason sitting around the table like they'd been waiting for me. "We need to talk," my dad said, his tone serious. My stomach dropped. "What did I do?" I asked cautiously. Mom sighed, folding her arms. "You didn't do anything, Evan. That's the problem. You need to start contributing more around here. We've decided that starting next month, you're going to pay rent if you want to keep living here. I blinked at them. Rent? I'm working part-time and trying to save for school. You know that. Mason smirked. Maybe if you stop wasting money on snacks and random junk, you'd have enough. I'm not wasting money, I said, heat rising in my face. Everything I make goes to gas, food, and my school fund. Dad leaned back in his chair. Then you'll just have to figure it out. You're almost 20. It's time to start acting like an adult. We're not going to coddle you forever. Coddle me? The word hit like a slap. They acted like I was some pampered kid living off their generosity. Not the same person who had almost died in their living room less than a month ago. What about Mason? I asked, my voice sharper than I intended. Is he paying rent? No, Mom said flatly. Mason's focused on school right now. We don't want him distracted. I laughed, a short, bitter sound I barely recognized as my own. So, let me get this straight. I work. I buy my own food. I barely ask you for anything. And you still want me to pay you to live in the house I grew up in. You need to learn responsibility, Dad said, like he was reading from a parenting manual. Something inside me cracked right then. I thought about how I'd been the one mowing the lawn all summer. How I'd been helping with groceries when Mason refused to lift a finger. How I cleaned up after his graduation party while they were all cheering his name. And now they wanted more. I went to my room without another word, my pulse racing so hard I thought I might collapse again. I sat on my bed in the dark, staring at the wall, feeling this cold, sharp anger settle in my chest. 2 days later, I came home to find my bedroom door open. My laptop was gone. I panicked, thinking we'd been robbed, until I heard Mason laughing from the living room. He was showing my dad a video on my laptop. A private video I'd recorded weeks ago where I vented about feeling like no one in the family cared about me. You really think we don't love you? Mom said, standing behind them with her arms crossed. Do you know how dramatic you sound? You went through my stuff? I asked, my voice shaking. You left it unlocked, Mason said smugly. If you didn't want anyone to see it, you shouldn't have recorded it. My ears were ringing. It wasn't just the invasion of privacy. It was the fact that they were laughing. My pain, my fear, my desperation. A punchline for their amusement. I walked past them without saying a word, grabbed my laptop out of Mason's hands, and went to my room. I locked the door and just sat there staring at the screen, shaking so hard I could barely type as I changed every password I had. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat awake listening to the muffled sound of my parents laughing at something on TV. And I made a quiet promise to myself. I would not give them another piece of me to break. And if they wanted to treat me like a burden, like a joke, then one day, I'd show them exactly what it felt like to be left behind. The house didn't feel like home anymore. It felt like enemy territory. Every room carrying some memory of being mocked, ignored, or dismissed. I stopped talking at dinner, stopped sharing anything about work, school, or my friends. It didn't matter what I said anyway. They'd always steer the conversation back to Mason's plans, Mason's grades, Mason's bright future. I became the shadow that moved around the edges of their perfect family picture. But the real blow came with the next paycheck. I'd been saving every cent I could for community college, carefully setting money aside. When I logged into my account that Friday, half of it was gone. I thought it was a bank error at first, but then I saw the transfer. It had gone straight to my parents' joint account. I confronted my mom about it, my hands shaking so hard I nearly dropped my phone. We told you, she said without an ounce of guilt. Rent is due. We just took care of it for you this time. That was my school money, I said, my voice breaking. You just took it without asking. You should be grateful we're giving you a roof over your head, my dad said from the kitchen doorway. You're not a kid anymore, Evan. Learn to pull your weight. I felt my chest tighten. Not like before. Not the medical kind, but the kind that made my throat ache and my eyes burn. I turned and walked straight to my room, closing the door quietly because if I slammed it, they'd just call me immature. I sat on the edge of my bed, staring at the empty spot in my bank account where months of work used to be. That was the lowest moment. Realizing that nothing I did mattered, that I could work myself sick, and they would still find a way to take from me. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't do anything that would give them the satisfaction of seeing me break. Instead, I grabbed a notebook from my desk and started writing things down. What I made every paycheck, what I spent, how much I'd need to get my own place. I wrote down my work hours, and I started looking at job postings online for anything that paid better than the grocery store. If they wanted rent, fine. But I wouldn't let them steal my future out from under me. I started picking up extra shifts whenever I could, even if it meant coming home after midnight and leaving again before sunrise. My mom complained that she never saw me anymore, but I just nodded and said nothing. Mason called me the house ghost. Inside, though, something was shifting. Every time they laughed at me, every time they brushed me off, I felt less tied to that house, less guilty about the idea of leaving. It was quiet revenge at first, small acts of reclaiming control. I started locking my door religiously. I bought a small safe with a combination lock and kept my wallet, important papers, and flash drive inside. I stopped sharing any passwords or schedules. By the end of the month, I had almost replaced the money they'd taken from me. And for the first time in weeks, I felt a spark of hope. Tiny, but enough to keep me going. One night, after another long shift, I sat in my car in the driveway and didn't go inside right away. I just sat there in the dark, gripping the steering wheel, imagining what it would feel like to leave for good. Not to run away in anger, not to storm out and slam the door, but to leave on my own terms. Quietly, calmly, in a way they wouldn't see coming. And the more I thought about it, the more certain I became that it wasn't just an idea anymore. It was a plan. The next few months became a blur of work, planning, and small, careful victories. I landed a second job at a local print shop, working mornings before my grocery store shifts. The pay wasn't glamorous, but the owner, Mr. Callahan, was the kind of person who noticed when you worked hard. After my first week, he gave me extra hours and let me train on the front desk instead of just stocking paper in the back. It was exhausting. There were days I barely slept more than a few hours, but every paycheck felt like a step closer to freedom. Watching the balance in my savings account climb again was the one thing that made the bone-deep fatigue worth it. I also started teaching myself skills that would make leaving easier. I watched videos about renting apartments, building credit, budgeting for utilities. I even started looking at online classes in graphic design since I liked the work I was doing at the print shop. At home, I kept my mouth shut. I paid the rent without arguing, but every time I handed my parents that envelope, I reminded myself it was temporary. Mason kept teasing me, calling me the tenant, but I didn't rise to it. And that's what started to scare them, my silence. One evening, I came home from work and found my mom sitting on the couch with her arms crossed. "You've been acting strange lately," she said. "You barely talk to us. You're out of the house all the time." "I'm working," I said simply, setting down my bag. "You're avoiding us," she pressed. "If you have a problem with this family, you should say it to our faces instead of sulking." I just shrugged. Nothing to say. She didn't like that. Mom thrives on arguments. It gives her something to win. The fact that I wasn't giving her a fight seemed to frustrate her more than any shouting match could have. Mason, meanwhile, was starting to slip. He'd always been the star student, but now that he was at university, his grades weren't as perfect as before. He came home one weekend furious about getting a C on a paper, and my parents spent the whole dinner reassuring him that everyone struggles their first semester. Then they turned to me and asked if I could take on an extra share of chores since Mason had so much on his plate. I nodded, smiling just a little. Sure, because the truth was, I'd already started house hunting. I found a tiny studio apartment above a bakery a few towns over. It wasn't fancy, just one room with a kitchenette and a bathroom barely big enough to turn around in. But when I stood in the doorway and looked around, I could picture my things there, my life there. I didn't sign the lease right away. I wanted to be sure. So I went back to work, saved for another month, and kept building my cushion until I had enough to cover rent, deposit, and at least 3 months of expenses. The day I finally signed, I felt this quiet surge of power. Not loud, not triumphant, but steady, like something in my chest had finally clicked into place. At dinner that night, Mason made another one of his jokes about me fainting if I had to carry anything heavier than a textbook. I just smiled, because I knew that in a few weeks, he'd be eating dinner at that table without me sitting across from him, and they wouldn't even see it coming. The lease was signed, the deposit was paid, and the keys sat in my pocket like a secret no one could touch. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. But I didn't want to just leave quietly. Not anymore. I wanted them to understand what they had done. Not just to notice my absence, but to feel it. To sit in that house and realize they had pushed me out piece by piece until there was nothing left of me for them to control. I didn't say a word to anyone about the apartment. I started moving my belongings little by little, packing only when I was sure no one was home. The safe with my documents went first, then my computer, then clothes, books, and the few personal things that actually mattered to me. Every trip to the new apartment felt like I was peeling another layer of myself out of that house. My room started to look emptier, but I made sure to keep it just messy enough that it didn't raise suspicion. The real turning point came one Saturday afternoon when I stopped by the print shop on my day off. Mr. Callahan called me into the back office and handed me an envelope. "You've been putting in a lot of hours here," he said. "I know you mentioned wanting to take classes, so consider this a little head start." Inside was a bonus check, more money than I'd seen in one place at once. I thanked him, probably too many times. But when I walked out of the shop and sat in my car, I just stared at the check, stunned. This was it. This was the last piece I needed to cut ties without fear. I used part of the money to prepay my rent 2 months ahead. The rest went into furnishing the apartment. A bed, a second-hand desk, a chair. It wasn't much, but it was mine. At home, the atmosphere was shifting. My parents had started making more comments about my disappearing act. "Are you hiding something from us?" my mom asked one night after dinner. "No," I said, keeping my face carefully neutral. "You're too quiet," she pressed. "It feels like you're just waiting to pounce with some big announcement." I almost smiled at that because she was half right. Mason had his own issues brewing. He'd just gotten into a fight with his professor over a late paper and spent the evening sulking, complaining that no one understood how hard he had it. My parents coddled him, made his favorite dinner, and told him they'd cover his textbooks next semester, so he wouldn't be distracted by money. I sat there eating my food, silent, already calculating which night would be the last one I'd sit at that table. I didn't want to storm out or yell. That would give them a chance to play the victims. No, I wanted my absence to be the thing that haunted them. I started keeping my car gassed up, my bag packed with a few essentials, just in case the moment presented itself earlier than planned. And in the meantime, I kept acting normal. Well, normal enough to keep them from guessing what was coming. Because when I finally left, I wasn't just going to disappear. I was going to leave behind a silence so loud they wouldn't be able to ignore it. It happened on a Thursday night, almost by accident. I came home late from the print shop, exhausted but strangely calm. The house was quiet. No TV blaring, no Mason's music shaking the walls. My parents were in the kitchen talking softly, and for a moment, I just stood in the entryway, listening to the sound of my own breathing. Something in me clicked. I walked straight to my room, shut the door, and looked around one last time. The bed was made, the shelves nearly empty, my clothes already gone except for a single jacket hanging in the closet. I opened my drawer, pulled out the last envelope of cash I'd been saving, and slid it under my pillow, my rent for the month. Then I took out a piece of paper and started writing. It wasn't angry or dramatic. No accusations. No yelling in ink. Just a single page written in my neatest handwriting. "I've paid my rent for this month in advance. After tonight, you won't have to worry about me pulling my weight anymore. Please don't contact me unless it's an emergency. I'm safe. I just can't live like this any longer." I folded the note and left it on the kitchen table, right next to the fruit bowl where I knew they couldn't miss it. Then I grabbed my bag, walked out to my car, and drove away without looking back. When I got to the apartment, I didn't even turn on the lights at first. I just stood in the middle of the room, listening to the quiet hum of the refrigerator, feeling my chest rise and fall. I was free. The next morning, I woke up to 12 missed calls from my mom, 6 from my dad, and 3 texts from Mason that ranged from, "Where are you?" to, "Are you serious right now?" I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I went about my day as usual. Went to work, had lunch, set up a small plant on the windowsill of my apartment. By the time I finally called my parents back that evening, they were frantic. "Evan, what do you think you're doing?" my mom demanded. "You can't just leave without telling us." "I did tell you," I said calmly. "There's a note on the table." "That's not the same thing," she snapped. "Do you have any idea how worried we've been?" "Yes," I said, my voice steady. And that's how I felt every time I was sitting in that house, wondering if anyone cared what happened to me. Silence. For the first time in months, no one interrupted me. No one dismissed me. No one laughed. "I'm not coming back," I said finally. "I hope you understand why." I hung up before they could argue. It was the quietest kind of revenge. No shouting, no slammed doors. But it was exactly what I needed. I had left on my own terms with my own money, and there was nothing they could take from me anymore. And judging by the next few texts I got from Mason, angry, confused, almost pleading, I knew it was working. They weren't laughing anymore. The first week after I left was quiet, almost eerily so. Then the calls started coming in earnest. First from my mom, then from my dad, and eventually from relatives I hadn't heard from in months. "Your parents are worried sick," my aunt said over the phone. "They said you ran away." "I didn't run away," I told her calmly. "I moved out." There's a difference. That sentiment seemed to spread through the family like wildfire because the next day my mom sent me a text that was almost apologetic. Almost. "We just don't understand why you had to do this," she wrote. "If you felt so bad, you should have told us. We would have helped." I stared at the message for a long time before replying, "I did tell you. You just called me dramatic." No response came after that. 2 weeks later, Mason called me out of the blue, which almost never happened unless he needed something. "Mom and Dad are losing it," he said, his voice quieter than I'd ever heard it. "They keep saying the house feels empty. Dad even had to mow the lawn himself last weekend." I almost smiled at that. "You're the golden child," I said lightly. "Guess it's your turn to carry the weight." He didn't laugh. "Look, I know I was a jerk. I shouldn't have gone through your stuff. I thought it was funny at the time, but I guess it wasn't." That was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get from him, and it was enough for me to finally let go of the anger I'd been carrying. But I didn't go back. Months passed and I kept building my life. The apartment slowly turned into a real home. Posters on the walls, my own dishes in the cabinets, a desk where I started doing freelance design work on the side. My savings grew, my health stabilized, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was steering my own life instead of being dragged along. One afternoon, I drove past my old neighborhood. The house was still there, still perfect and tidy on the outside, but I didn't stop. Later that night, my phone buzzed with a message from my mom. "We miss you. The house isn't the same without you. When you're ready, maybe we can talk." I put the phone down on the table and looked around my little apartment. The soft glow of the lamp, the plant on the windowsill, the quiet hum of my own space. For the first time, I didn't feel guilty about the silence. I texted back one line. "I'm not coming back, but I hope you finally understand why." Then I turned off my phone, leaned back in my chair, and let the quiet fill the room. Not heavy this time, but peaceful. For the first time in my life, it was my silence. And it was exactly what I wanted. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My name's Jordan. I'm 28, single, and I guess you could say I've always been the black sheep of the family. Not because I ever did anything wrong, but because I never really fit the mold my family expected. I didn't go to med school like my cousin Rachel. I didn't join the family business like my older brother Nathan. I didn't even stay in town. I left, built a quiet life for myself, freelance writing, traveling a bit, and mostly keeping to myself. I never really expected much from them anymore, not after years of being the afterthought. But I'll be honest, when that invitation came in the mail, thick, cream-colored cardstock with my name spelled out in gold, something stirred in me. Nathan was getting engaged to his girlfriend, Ashley, and he was having a party to celebrate. For a brief second, I felt like maybe I was included for real, like maybe I was finally being seen. I hadn't heard much from Nathan lately. We texted now and then, mostly short exchanges like, "Happy birthday?" or "How's work?" but nothing deep. We hadn't had a real conversation in over a year. So, when I opened the envelope, saw the elegant script, and realized it was an actual invite, not just some group text or passive mention, I thought maybe things were changing. Maybe this was his way of reaching out. The engagement party was set for a Saturday evening at some fancy vineyard about 30 minutes outside the city. I spent more time than I care to admit choosing what to wear. Something nice but not flashy. I went with a dark navy blazer, white shirt, and slacks. Clean, simple. I even bought a gift, had it wrapped at the shop. Something for their kitchen registry, a fancy Dutch oven they picked out. It was expensive, but I wanted it to be thoughtful. I wanted to show up and be supportive. When I pulled into the gravel parking lot, the sun was dipping low, casting a warm amber glow over the vines. It felt cinematic. For a moment, I imagined walking in, seeing Nathan's face light up, maybe him pulling me into a hug and saying, "You came." Maybe Ashley would smile and say, "We're so glad you're here." And maybe, just maybe, I'd sit down at a table and feel like part of a family again. Instead, I barely got through the door before my aunt leaned in, clutching her glass, her voice low and syrupy. "He only invited you out of pity, you know?" she whispered, her breath smelling faintly of Chardonnay. "Ashley said they had to. Otherwise, it would be too obvious." I froze. I was still holding the wrapped gift in both hands. "What?" I asked, thinking I must have misheard. She tilted her head, gave me this look like I was some stray dog who wandered into the wrong yard. "You know how it is," she added with a shrug, like this was just common knowledge. "It's nothing personal. We just didn't think you'd actually show." That hit me harder than I expected. I looked past her into the main room. Round tables with crisp linens, floral centerpieces, strings of golden lights overhead. Everyone was already seated, laughing, clinking glasses, toasting. There were name cards neatly placed in front of each plate. I walked past a few tables slowly, scanning each one. My name wasn't there. I walked the perimeter once, twice. No seat, no card. No one looked up, no one said hi, not even Nathan. I stood there awkwardly by the bar for a minute, holding that wrapped box like a security blanket. I must have looked like a fool, or worse, like someone crashing a wedding they weren't invited to. My chest tightened, and I felt this strange mix of shame and disappointment rising up like a tide. I had told myself not to get my hopes up. I told myself it didn't matter, that I was just going out of politeness, but it did matter more than I wanted to admit. I turned around without a word and walked straight out. I didn't even set the gift down. I just carried it back to my car, placed it in the passenger seat like a person, and sat there in silence. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there staring out the windshield at the gravel path ahead. Then I drove home. I didn't post about it. Didn't text anyone. I just went quiet. The next morning, someone rang my doorbell at 8:12 a.m. I hadn't even made coffee yet. I opened the door in sweatpants, my hair a mess. And there he was, Nathan, my brother, wearing yesterday's suit minus the tie, looking like he hadn't slept. "You didn't have to make a scene," he said flatly, like I'd burned the place down. I blinked. "A scene?" "You stormed out. People noticed." I laughed once, sharp and humorless. "Nathan, there was no seat for me. No one even said hello." He shifted uncomfortably. "You could have just stayed. Found a chair somewhere." "I don't know anyone," I mingled. "I wasn't supposed to be there, was I?" I asked. "You didn't plan for me." He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "Look, Ashley handled the seating." "All right." I told her to keep it small. "I didn't think you'd make a big deal out of it." "So I was invited out of pity," I said quietly. "That's what Aunt Linda said." He sighed and rubbed his face. "She talks too much. She wasn't supposed to say that." I stepped back from the door, suddenly very tired. "You should go, Nathan." "No, really. If this is the part where I'm supposed to apologize for embarrassing you, it's not going to happen. He looked hurt, like he hadn't expected that, like I somehow turned on him instead of the other way around. This is exactly why we don't talk much, he muttered. No, I said, my voice colder than I intended. We don't talk because you only remember I exist when it's convenient, when you want to feel good about inviting the other siblings so no one can say you didn't. He didn't respond, just stared at me for a moment, then turned and walked down the porch steps back to his car. As he pulled away, I looked over at the kitchen table where the engagement gift still sat, still wrapped, still unopened. I didn't even know what to do with it anymore. Give it away, return it, leave it on his doorstep? That moment stayed with me. Not just the whisper from Aunt Linda or the lack of a name card, but that stunned look on Nathan's face when I refused to play along, when I didn't accept my role as the forgotten sibling, grateful just to be near the table even if there was no seat. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot, because if I wasn't part of the family, then I didn't owe them anything. And I had something they'd all conveniently forgotten about. Something they were going to need very soon. Let's just say they were going to remember my name, whether there was a card or not. For a few days I went completely quiet. Didn't answer texts. Didn't open social media. Just disconnected. It wasn't out of spite. It was survival. I needed space to think, to feel, to let the sting fade so I could breathe again without tasting bitterness. But underneath the silence, I was thinking, remembering. See, what most of my family didn't know, because they never cared enough to ask, was that for the past 3 years, I'd been helping out behind the scenes with something pretty important to all of them. My grandfather's trust. Before he passed, Grandpa Thomas made me one of the trustees on his estate. Quietly, he didn't make a show of it, didn't announce it at a family dinner or send out a formal notice. He just pulled me aside one day, the last time I visited him at his old house in Vermont, and said, "You've got a good head and a quiet heart, Jordan. I want you to help make sure the money doesn't ruin the family." At the time, I didn't understand what he meant. I thought he was just rambling about taxes and accounts, but then the paperwork came, the lawyers, the meetings. I learned the ropes. I learned that the trust had very clear clauses, very specific stipulations, and most importantly, I learned that a large portion of the funds weren't just handed out blindly. They were conditional, things like education support, mortgage subsidies, even business loans. Those required approval from the trustees, me and a firm out of Boston. Nathan's entire business, in fact, his entrepreneurial consulting agency that he liked to brag about at every family event, had received a sizable loan from that trust 2 years ago. He didn't know I had anything to do with it. Grandpa had asked me not to say. Said it would be better that way. But now I was starting to think that promise had run its course. A week after the party, I got an email from the firm. A new disbursement request had come in from Nathan, a sizable one. He wanted additional funds to expand operations, including leasing a second office space and hiring a part-time assistant. His request was wordy, filled with business jargon and vague projections. But the part that stuck out, he needed the funds fast, within 2 weeks, or a deal he was chasing would fall through. Normally, I would have passed it along without question. Approved it, let the money flow. But now, I clicked reply and asked for a meeting. We met at a small cafe downtown, neutral ground. I chose the place on purpose. It was quiet, public, and not far from his office. Nathan arrived late, still wearing his tailored suit, but his energy was off. He looked tense, checking his watch, tapping the table. "Thanks for meeting," he said quickly, sitting across from me. "I assume this is about the request." I nodded, taking a sip of coffee. "It is." He leaned forward. "So, can we move forward? I know the firm usually drags their feet, but this one's time-sensitive." I studied him for a moment. "You didn't know I was a trustee, did you?" His eyebrows pulled together. "What?" "I've been one of the trustees on Grandpa's estate since he passed. I've seen every request, every report, every loan." He went quiet. His face went pale, then flushed. "Seriously? Seriously?" He exhaled visibly, trying to recalibrate. "Okay, that's unexpected. But fine. Look, you've seen the numbers. It's a good investment." I leaned back in my chair. It might be. But here's the thing, Nathan. These funds aren't guaranteed. They're based on values Grandpa outlined. Family unity, responsibility, transparency. Come on, Jordan, he said, irritation creeping in. Don't make this personal. This is business. But you made it personal, I replied, voice steady. At that party, with the way you treated me, with the way your fiancé handled the seating chart, or lack of one, with how you couldn't even look me in the eye that night. He opened his mouth to defend himself, but I cut him off. And then you show up at my house trying to guilt me, saying I made a scene. No, I didn't make a scene. I quietly walked away, but I could have. Nathan leaned forward again, tone lower. So what? This is revenge. No, I said calmly. This is accountability. He looked like he wanted to flip the table, but we were in public, and Nathan's image mattered more to him than anything. So, he sat back, forced a smile and said, Look, I'll talk to Ashley. We'll smooth things over. I'll apologize if that's what you want. That's not what I want, I said. I want to know that if this trust is going to support you again, you'll treat the people behind it with a little more respect. His jaw clenched. So, you're holding the funds hostage until I play nice? You can call it that. I call it protecting Grandpa's legacy. He stood up, almost knocking over his chair. You're unbelievable. And you, I said softly, should be more careful who you treat like they don't matter. He stormed out. I stayed and finished my coffee. Later that week, I sent the firm a report. Detailed concerns about the request. Questionable expenses, unclear ROI, lack of transparency in prior funding reports. I didn't outright veto it, but I recommended a delay, an audit, a deeper review, which meant the funds wouldn't be approved anytime soon. I didn't hear from Nathan for 2 more days. Then one evening, I got a call. It was Mom. Jordan, she said, her voice sharp. What are you doing? I blinked. Hi, Mom. Nice to hear from you, too. Don't play games. Nathan told me you're blocking the trust funds. He needs that money. I stood up and walked to the window, staring out at the rain tapping against the glass. So now you call. You've always been so sensitive, she said, as if that explained everything. You didn't even give them a chance at the party. You just left. You embarrassed us. I embarrassed you? I repeated. By not sitting at a table that didn't exist for me? You should have spoken up, she snapped. Made it work. That's what family does. I laughed, cold and bitter. No, Mom. What family does is make room. What family does is notice when someone's being excluded. What family does is care. You all made it very clear where I stand. There was silence on the line. Then she said, So this is payback. No, I said. This is me finally setting a boundary. And if you don't like that, maybe ask yourself why. I hung up before she could respond. But I knew that call was just the beginning, because once the money stopped flowing, people who never spoke to me were going to start showing up, and not for the reasons they claimed. Took less than 48 hours. By the end of the week, my phone went from collecting dust to lighting up like it was New Year's Eve. Missed calls, voicemails, texts that started off polite. Hey Jordan, can we talk? Then escalated into passive-aggressive guilt trips. First it was Nathan, then Mom again, then Aunt Linda. Even Cousin Rachel, who hadn't said more than 5 words to me in 3 years, suddenly wanted to grab coffee and catch up. Yeah, okay. I didn't respond. Instead, I forwarded everything to the Boston firm handling the trust and asked them to begin a compliance review. I wanted a paper trail, something formal. I wasn't trying to ruin Nathan, but if he was going to use Grandpa's money, he was going to do it by the book. And I wasn't going to be bullied or sweet-talked out of enforcing that. The trust wasn't some family piggy bank. It was set up to support, not enable, and enabling was exactly what my family had become experts at. Around that time, I started hearing whispers from my old hometown. My childhood friend, Daniel, who still worked at the local credit union, shot me a message. Hey, just FYI, heard your brother's expansion got delayed. He's blaming funding issues. You good? I told him I was fine. Better than fine, actually, because for the first time in years, I wasn't playing the silent background role anymore. I was steering the wheel. A week later, the fallout began. Nathan showed up to my apartment again, but this time I didn't open the door. He knocked once, twice, then a third time. I stood behind the peephole, arms crossed, heart calm. "I know you're in there," he muttered. "Come on, Jordan. Don't do this." He paused, then added, "You're going to tank everything over a party?" That made me laugh quietly, because he still didn't get it. This wasn't about just the party. It was about years of subtle exclusion. Birthday dinners I wasn't invited to. Group family vacations where I found out through Instagram. Conversations I was talked over in. Jokes made at my expense that no one thought twice about. The party wasn't the beginning. It was the last straw. I watched him from the peephole as he stood there a minute longer, then finally turned and walked off. No voicemail, no apology, just silence. And then came the real surprise. Ashley texted me. I almost didn't recognize the number, but the message was short and polite. "Hi Jordan. I know things have been tense. Would you be open to meeting? Just the two of us." I sat with that for a while. I didn't know her anything, but something about the tone made me curious. It didn't feel fake. It felt tired. We met at a quiet tea shop near my place. She was already seated when I arrived, dressed down in jeans and a sweater. Not a trace of the socialite vibe she usually gave off at family events. "I appreciate you coming," she said genuinely. I sat down, keeping my guard up. "What did you want to talk about?" She sighed. "I'm not here to ask you for money or pressure you about the trust. I just wanted to say I'm sorry." I blinked. That was unexpected. She looked down at her cup. "I didn't handle the party well. I should have made sure you had a seat, a proper one. Not just because Nathan asked me to invite you, but because you deserved it." I didn't say anything. I just listened. "I thought you didn't care," she admitted. "That you were the kind of person who didn't like big events. Nathan always said you were fine being left alone. But seeing you walk out like that, I realized maybe we've all misunderstood you." I tilted my head. "So, you didn't want me there?" She looked ashamed at first. "No, but not because of you. Because I didn't know you. And Nathan, well, he talks about you like you're this distant, unpredictable wild card. He made it seem like you'd either not show up or cause drama. I know now that was unfair." I exhaled slowly. "I didn't cause drama. I just left." "I know," she said softly. "And that hurt worse than if you had. That caught me off guard." She continued, "You walking out quietly made people start asking questions. Why didn't you stay? Why wasn't there a seat? Why wasn't there a photo of you with Nathan? My parents noticed. Even some of our friends. It was a bad look." I folded my arms. "So now I'm a PR problem." She shook her head. "No, you're a reality check." We sat there in silence for a moment. Then she said something I didn't expect. "I want to make things right. Not to fix the trust. Not to fix Nathan. Just to fix this." I was quiet, still cautious, still processing. "You shouldn't be treated like a second-class relative," she added. "Especially when you've been holding more strings than any of us realized." I didn't agree to anything that day, but I thanked her for the honesty, and I left with one thought ringing in my head. Maybe I wasn't the one who needed fixing after all. The next day, Nathan called again. This time, I answered. "Hey," he said, voice tired. Not angry, not smug, just tired. "Hey." There was a long pause. "Ashley said she talked to you." "She did." "I'm not great at this," he muttered. "I know I've messed up a lot." I didn't respond. "I've been thinking a lot," he went on, "about the way I've treated you, the way we all have. I always assumed you were fine on your own, that you didn't want to be included. So, I didn't push, didn't invite, didn't think twice." "That's convenient," I said. "Easier to believe someone doesn't want to be included than to admit you've left them out." He was quiet. I could hear him exhale on the other end. "You're right." Another pause. Then, "I'm not asking you to approve the funds. Not anymore. I just want to talk properly. Maybe grab lunch. Just you and me. No pressure." I didn't answer right away because, for the first time, he wasn't coming to demand or defend. He was just showing up. And maybe that was a start. But I wasn't going to let my guard down completely. Not yet. Because this was the same brother who left me standing at the edge of his celebration like I was invisible. The same brother who only realized I mattered when the money stopped. And now the real question was, did he care about me or just what I could give him? The next move was mine, and I had one in mind. I didn't say yes to lunch right away. I told Nathan I'd think about it. And I meant it because here's the thing, words are easy. A few sorries, a few we messed ups. And suddenly everyone thinks the slate is clean. But I wasn't looking for clean. I was looking for real. And real takes time. Real takes action. So I waited. A few days passed. Then a week. No follow-up calls, no desperate voicemails. It was oddly peaceful. I thought maybe Nathan had given up, accepted my silence as a no. Then one morning I got a letter. Not an email, not a text, a physical letter. Handwritten. 3 pages. It was from Nathan. I sat at my kitchen table with my coffee and read the whole thing twice. It wasn't perfect. Parts of it felt like he was still trying to justify himself, still trying to rationalize the years of silence, of exclusion. But buried in all that, there was something genuine. He told me about the pressure he'd felt taking over Dad's role in the family business. How Mom leaned on him and leaned into the idea that he was the good son, the reliable one. How he resented me for having the freedom to walk away from all of it while he stayed behind and did what was expected. He wrote, "I told myself you didn't care because that was easier than admitting I did. I looked at you and saw someone brave enough to live on their own terms. And instead of learning from you, I judged you. I made you the outsider because I didn't know how to be anything but the insider." That part stuck with me. He ended the letter by saying, "If you never want to speak to me again, I get it. But if there's a small part of you that wants to rebuild something, even if it's slow and awkward, I'm here." I stared at those last 2 words. I'm here. It didn't fix everything, but it was a start. So yeah, I agreed to lunch. We met at a small diner we used to go to as kids. He picked it on purpose, I could tell. He was already there when I arrived, sipping black coffee, looking nervous. It was a weird full-circle moment, sitting across from him in that old vinyl booth, the smell of pancakes and bacon in the air like no time had passed. Except everything had. We talked. Not about the trust, not about the party, not even about the letter, not right away. We talked about stupid things like how weird it was that the diner still had the same jukebox, how Dad still refused to upgrade his phone, how Rachel had recently tried to go viral on TikTok with a video of her dog wearing sunglasses. We laughed. It wasn't forced. It wasn't fake. Eventually, the conversation drifted into deeper water. He asked about my writing, my travel, my last relationship, which had ended a few months ago. I asked about his business, about Ashley, about whether he was actually happy or just checking boxes on some invisible family to-do list. He hesitated, then admitted, "I don't know." That, more than anything, told me he was trying. We talked for 3 hours. At the end of it, we didn't hug. We didn't cry. We didn't make dramatic promises to stay in touch. We just said, "Let's do this again." And I meant it. But that wasn't the end. There was still the matter of the trust. See, even though Nathan had made an effort, there were still structural issues with his business proposal. The review I'd requested had uncovered some questionable spending. Nothing illegal, but sloppy, unprofessional, and honestly, not the kind of thing Grandpa would have signed off on. The firm called me a few days later. "What do you want to do?" they asked. And I realized I didn't want to block him. I didn't want revenge. I wanted accountability. So I called Nathan, told him what the auditors found, told him he had 2 options. He could rework the proposal with full transparency and documentation, or the funds would be denied. I expected him to argue, to get defensive. Instead, he said, "Fair." Then he paused and added, "Will you help me fix it?" That part one hadn't expected. We spent the next few weeks going through everything. Meetings, calls, spreadsheets. I showed him how the trust board evaluated proposals, how to frame things, what not to say. It was awkward at first, but slowly, something started to shift. We weren't just brothers again, we were teammates. Word got around, of course. Mom found out. First, she didn't say anything. But then, one Sunday afternoon, she texted me out of the blue. "Dinner tonight?" No explanation. No emoji. Just, dinner tonight? I stared at it for a good 10 minutes, then replied, "Why?" She answered, "Because I owe you an apology." I didn't go. Not that night. But I didn't block her either because, like I said, real takes time. Ashley and Nathan eventually sent out new wedding invitations. Same couple, same location, but a completely different approach. This time, my name was not just included. It was printed first on the list of family members. In the inner envelope, there was a handwritten note from Ashley tucked inside. "We'd be honored if you came. There's a seat with your name on it." Literally. And you know what? I went. The wedding was beautiful, classy, thoughtful. And when I arrived, the first person who greeted me was Aunt Linda. But this time, she looked mortified. "Jordan," she said with a tight smile. "So glad you could make it." I smiled back. "Didn't think I'd actually show? Did you?" Her cheeks flushed. "Well, of course we hoped. I have a seat this time, right?" I asked, walking past her. I found my table, table 3, close to the dance floor. My name was there, engraved on a thick white card in elegant script. Next to it, a small place card that read, "Thank you for holding us accountable." Funny how things come full circle. What started as an insult, being invited out of pity, had turned into something else. I was no longer the forgotten sibling, no longer the outsider. But I didn't need to be the center of attention either. I just needed to be seen. And now I finally was. Not because I made a scene, but because I made a choice. To stop apologizing for existing in the shadows of people who never offered me light. To stop letting guilt dictate my boundaries. To speak up. To walk out when I needed to. And to walk back in on my own terms when I was ready. Because sometimes the quietest exits make the loudest impact. Now on to the next story. Story 6. I've been lurking here for a while and I never thought I'd have a story worth sharing. But after years of dealing with my family's entitlement, I think it's finally time to put it all out there. This is the story of how my parents made me work 2 jobs as a teenager while my brother, their golden child, got to live at home rent-free, do nothing and still be treated like royalty. And how years later, when they needed my help, they tried to manipulate me one last time. So, let's rewind to when I was 16. My parents were the kind of people who believed in tough love. But only for me. My younger brother, who we'll call Jason, was special. Not in any actual way, he was just the youngest, and for some reason that meant he was treated like a prince while I was treated like an unpaid servant. When I turned 16, my parents sat me down and gave me a whole speech about learning responsibility. Basically, that meant they weren't going to pay for anything anymore. Not my clothes, not my phone, not even food if I wanted snacks outside of the 3 sad meals they made. If I wanted anything at all, I had to get a job. So I did. Actually, I got 2 jobs because one minimum wage job wasn't enough to cover everything. I went to school during the day, worked evenings at a fast food place, and then did weekend shifts at a retail store. Sucked. But I did what I had to do. Meanwhile, Jason, he got to sit on his ass all day, play video games, and complain when dinner wasn't exactly what he wanted. He never had to lift a finger. I brought it up once, just once. I asked my parents why Jason didn't have to get a job, why he wasn't expected to help around the house, and why he got free spending money when I had to break my back working. Their response? He deserves to be taken care of. Like I didn't. Like I wasn't also their kid. That was the moment I realized exactly where I stood in the family hierarchy. Below Jason, below their expectations, and definitely below their interest in fairness. Fast forward a few years. The moment I turned 18, I moved out. I had been saving every penny I could, and I managed to get a tiny, run-down apartment with a roommate. It wasn't much, but it was mine. My parents barely reacted when I left. They didn't help, didn't offer support, and didn't even seem to care. Jason, he just shrugged and kept living his consequence-free life. I went no contact for a while, just trying to build my own life without their nonsense. I worked my ass off, climbed my way up in my job, and eventually got to a place where I was financially stable. I wasn't rolling in money, but I was doing well. Meanwhile, Jason was still at home, still jobless, still mooching off my parents, and apparently, still deserving to be taken care of. Then, out of nowhere, my parents reached out. I hadn't heard from them in years, but suddenly they were calling, texting, and leaving voicemails. It started with, "Hey, how have you been?" but quickly turned into, "We need to talk." When I finally answered, I was hit with the most dramatic, over-the-top sob story I had ever heard. They told me that my dad had lost his job, my mom was struggling with serious health issues, and they were barely making ends meet. They needed help, financial help, urgently. They made it sound like they were on the verge of losing the house, like they were barely scraping by, like my mother was on her deathbed. At first, I almost felt bad. Almost. But then I started asking questions. What exactly was wrong with my mom? What specifically happened with my dad's job? What had they tried before reaching out to me? And most importantly, was Jason working now? Silence. Awkward fumbling. A few weak excuses. And then the truth started slipping through the cracks. My dad had lost his job, but he was on unemployment and just didn't feel like getting another one. My mom had some health problems, but nothing life-threatening, just normal aging stuff that they exaggerated to make it sound dire. And Jason, of course, still wasn't working. He was now in his mid-20s and still mooching. They didn't need my help because they were desperate. They needed it because they wanted to keep living the same way they always had, without responsibility, without consequences, and without Jason having to lift a damn finger. That was the moment everything clicked. They didn't care about me. They didn't care about all the years I struggled. They didn't even care about trying to make things fair. They just saw that I was doing well and thought, "Oh, perfect. Our other kid can bankroll us now." And that was when I made my decision. So there I was, holding my phone, listening to my parents' sob story, and the more they talked, the more disgusted I became. They didn't even try to hide their manipulation. It was clear as day. They were trying to guilt-trip me into giving them money so they could keep living the same entitled, lazy life they'd always lived. They didn't care about me. They didn't care about the sacrifices I made. It was just about getting what they could from me. When I stayed silent for a moment, they started to get desperate. We don't know what we're going to do, honey." My mom's voice cracked. "We might lose the house. You know how much we've sacrificed for you. You owe us." Owe them? The audacity. I was the one who sacrificed everything for them. I worked 2 jobs in high school while Jason sat there and lived rent-free, playing games all day. I sacrificed my childhood to support them, and this was how they saw it? I couldn't help myself. I scoffed. "Oh, you." There was a long pause. "Well, yes," my mom continued, her voice a little more firm now. "You've been on your own for so long, and we've always supported you in our own way. But with everything happened lately, we really need some help." I stayed calm, even though my blood was boiling. I could feel my heartbeat in my ears. "I'm not sending you money," I said flatly. "You've had plenty of time to prepare. You didn't care when I was working my ass off just to get by. You didn't care when I was struggling, and you still made me pay for everything. But now that you need something, you think I owe you." Silence. I could hear them in the background talking quietly to each other, probably trying to figure out what to say next. I wasn't giving in. But then, just when I thought they might back off, Jason's voice came through the line. "Hey, what's up, sis?" The nerve. I tried to keep my tone neutral. "Not much. Just telling mom and dad that I'm not sending money." Jason chuckled. "Come on. It's not like they're asking for much. Just a little help, right?" I could feel my frustration building, but I stayed cool. "Yeah, and last time I checked, you're an adult too, Jason. Maybe you should step up and help them out." Jason's laugh faded. Oh, come on. I'm the baby of the family, you know? They've always taken care of me. Why are you so upset? Because you're 26 years old and still living at home doing absolutely nothing. It's time to grow up, I snapped. There was a long pause on the other end. Then Jason muttered, "Whatever. You're just being selfish." It wasn't even about me being selfish. It was about me finally standing up for myself. But of course, Jason didn't get that. "Yeah, I guess I'm just selfish for not wanting to keep paying for their laziness," I said, feeling the sarcasm drip from my words. That's when my mom jumped back into the conversation. "It's not like that, sweetie. We just need a little help. Okay? You don't have to give us everything. Just a little something. Please, we're your family." That family card again. "No, Mom. You're right. I don't have to give you anything, I said, my voice getting a little colder now. But you know what? I'm gonna make this easy for you. Since you've always been so generous with Jason, I think you'll have no problem continuing to support him. Let him take care of you for once. There was a moment of stunned silence. I could practically hear the gears turning in their heads as they realized I wasn't budging. Finally, my mom's voice cracked again. Sweetie, you're being unreasonable. You can't just abandon us like this. We've always been there for you. That was it. I couldn't take it anymore. You were never there for me. You never supported me. I've been taking care of myself for years, and I'm done being the one to pick up the pieces every time you mess up. So no, I'm not sending money, and I'm not going to be your backup plan anymore. You'll have to figure it out just like I did. There was a long pause. I could hear Jason in the background arguing with them. My mom was trying to reason with me, but I wasn't hearing it. Please don't do this, my mom pleaded. We're your parents. We took care of you when you were younger. Can you help us now? I sighed. I was done. Done with the manipulation, done with the guilt trips. No. You had your chance, I said, my voice firm. You've made your choices. Now you get to live with them. There was silence on the other end for what felt like forever. Then Jason started whining. What is wrong with you? Why are you acting like this? You're family and you're just going to leave us high and dry. I didn't even reply. I just hung up. That was the last straw. The next day, I checked my bank account. There was a small, barely noticeable charge from my parents' bank account. A charge I never authorized. It wasn't a huge amount, just a couple $100, but it was my money. The audacity. I called them again. No answer. So I emailed them, asking them to explain the charge. The email I got back was classic. A lame excuse about a misunderstanding, and how they didn't realize they were using the wrong account. Of course, it was all a lie. They had taken the money thinking I wouldn't notice. At that point, I knew I had to take things further. I wasn't going to let them get away with it. But what could I do to really make them feel what they'd done? To make them understand that I wasn't just some bank account to dip into whenever it was convenient for them? So there I was, staring at my phone, reading that email from my parents, which was just the kind of lowball excuse I had expected. Misunderstanding. My ass? They knew exactly what they were doing. I could barely contain my rage when I saw it. The small charge, a couple $100, that had somehow ended up in my parents' account. At first, I couldn't figure out how they got into my money because I'd been super careful with my banking. Then it hit me. Here's how it went down. A couple of years ago, during one of those rare family bonding moments, my mom had asked if I could link my card to their account in case of emergencies. You know, the kind of emergency where they could borrow money and then forget to pay it back. I had been naive, agreeing to it because I trusted them. It was supposed to be for emergencies only, but let's be real, nothing ever stays an emergency in their world. I should have known better. Over the years, I had kept my card linked to their account mainly for situations like when I needed to pay for something that wasn't accessible through my own funds, like a last-minute flight or an urgent repair. But I'd made it clear from the start that it wasn't to be used for their personal spending. Except, as I looked at that charge, it became clear that's exactly what they'd done. They had found some loophole in their account system where they could pull money from my linked account using their own login credentials to withdraw from my balance. They had been doing this for months. I didn't catch it earlier because I wasn't paying enough attention, but now that I saw it, I realized how deep they'd gone into my finances. It was a small charge at first, probably to see if I'd notice. And of course I had. But then I thought about how many other times they dipped into my account without my knowledge. I felt violated and stupid. I sat there for a long time staring at that charge. My blood was boiling. They had crossed a line, one that I wasn't going to let them get away with. I decided to call them, but not to give them a chance to lie their way out of it. I was done with the soft approach. It was time to turn the tables. Ring, ring. My mom picked up the phone, and before she could even say hello, I shot right to the point. Mom, I said, my voice shaking but controlled. I noticed a charge on my account. I need you to explain it. There was a pause. I could hear the rustling of papers on the other end as she scrambled to think of an excuse. Oh, I don't know what you mean, honey. What charge? I clicked the email open, pulling up the exact details. The one where you took $250 from my account. I know what you did. Oh. My mom's voice instantly got defensive. That was just a mistake. We didn't mean to, it was for the house repairs, remember? We needed help paying for it and we thought. No, you didn't. You didn't ask me for permission. You just took it. I cut her off, refusing to let her weasel her way out of it. You've been using my account without my knowledge. How long has this been going on? My mom started stuttering, and I could hear her trying to shift the blame. Well, it's not like you need all that money anyway. You're doing fine and Jason has been struggling. He's the one who needed the money. We didn't know who else to turn to. Wait, Jason? She was trying to tell me she'd taken money from my account because he was struggling? The same Jason who sat on his ass all day playing video games and avoiding work? The one who didn't lift a finger to help with anything? My hands clenched into fists. You took my money to help Jason? Couldn't believe it. Jason, the guy who still lives in your house rent-free while I've been working 2 jobs for years just to get by. That's who you're taking money from me for. My mom's voice dropped to almost a whisper. Please don't make a scene. No, don't tell me not to make a scene, I said, cutting her off. You're taking my money without my permission. You're lying to me and you expect me to just roll over and accept it? What kind of parent does that to their child? There was a heavy silence on the other end, and then I heard Jason's voice. Dude, why are you being so dramatic? Just let it go. I was done. I hung up the phone without another word, my heart pounding in my chest. They didn't care. They didn't even understand what they'd done. At that point, I knew it was over. I was no longer going to play their game. I couldn't change them, but I could make them feel the weight of their actions. And that's when the idea hit me. I wasn't going to just sit back and watch them keep taking from me. No, I was going to make sure they never did this again. The next day, I reached out to my bank. I told them what happened and I made sure they'd freeze the linked account. No more access, no more automatic withdrawals. I wasn't going to let my parents or Jason steal from me anymore. I made it clear to them that I was serious. I filed a complaint with the bank, explaining how they had violated my trust. And then I did something I'd never done before. I went no contact. No more phone calls, no more texts, no more running to their rescue. If they wanted to keep playing this game, I wasn't going to be their pawn anymore. But what I didn't know at the time was that things were about to escalate even further. I'd soon discover just how far they'd go to keep taking from me, and how far I was willing to go to make them face the consequences. It had been days since I'd gone no contact with my parents, and I'd never felt more at peace. No more guilt trips, no more manipulation, no more pretending to be okay with how they treated me. They had crossed a line, and for the first time I wasn't running back to fix it. I thought I'd be able to relax, but of course that wasn't going to happen. My phone rang that morning. Blocked number. I groaned. I knew it was one of them. I didn't pick up. The message left was from Mom. I don't understand what's happening with you. You've always been so strong for us. Why are you shutting us out now? Jason needs you and you're just abandoning your family. I know things have been tough, but you've always been the one to fix things. Please, I need you to fix this. Don't let this be the end of us. I listened to the message and felt nothing. No guilt, no urge to call her back. I was done. I blocked her number immediately, but I knew that wasn't going to stop them. It was only a matter of time before they escalated things. Sure enough, 2 hours later, my phone buzzed again. Another voicemail, this time from Dad. I braced myself. This has gone too far. I don't know who you're listening to, but you're making a huge mistake. Jason's having a hard time. Okay? You think he doesn't deserve help? I'm not going to beg you, but we need you. This isn't how a family works. You're abandoning us, and I can't let you do that. It was the same old routine. The guilt, the drama, the manipulation. They had always been good at making me feel like I owed them something, and here they were trying to twist everything into my fault. But I wasn't buying it anymore. I knew what this was. They were trying to make me feel bad about my decision, make me question myself. They wanted me to break and go back to being their emotional and financial support. I wasn't going to be their punching bag anymore. It was just after dinner when I got another message, this time from Jason. I could almost feel the eye roll forming as I opened it. Hey, you've really messed this up. Mom and Dad are upset and now you're just going to ignore us? You've always been the one to fix things and now you're just walking away. I don't know why you're doing this, but you're hurting the family. Don't you think you should step up? You've always helped before. What's changed? I stared at the message for a long time. He was really trying to guilt me into helping just like Dad had. I felt a flash of anger but quickly swashed it down. They had no right to ask for anything from me after everything they put me through. I decided to text back, not because I owed him an explanation, but because I was tired of them thinking they could manipulate me. Jason, this isn't about you anymore. It's about how I've been treated for years. You've always taken, never given. I've supported everyone else while I was struggling. I'm not your safety net anymore. I sent the message and I knew it was probably going to make him angry, but honestly, I didn't care. I needed to stand my ground. I sat back, feeling a sense of peace for a moment. It was quiet again, but that peace was short-lived. 2 days later, my phone buzzed with an email. It was from Dad again. The subject line read, "We need to talk." I opened it, not expecting much but still feeling a twinge of dread in my chest. I don't know what you're doing, but this can't go on. We've done everything for you. We gave you everything you needed and now you're treating us like this. We're your parents. We deserve better than this. The words stung, but not for the reasons they thought they would. They didn't deserve better than this. They needed to face the consequences of their actions. I started typing a response but stopped. No more explanations, no more guilt. I wasn't going to fall into the trap again. Instead, I forwarded the email to a friend and added a simple message. Just a reminder. Don't let anyone tell you that you owe them. Ever. I could feel my blood boiling, but I held firm. Just as I was about to shut my phone off for the night, I received a call from Mom. I didn't answer, kept ringing and ringing. I stared at the screen, feeling a mix of anger and exhaustion. They weren't going to stop, but this time I was ready. I waited for the voicemail. When it finally came through, it was worse than I expected. You've pushed us too far. Now you're really going to leave us to deal with everything on our own? Jason's been crying about this and now your father is upset too. We've been nothing but good to you. This is what happens when you turn your back on your family. How could you do this? You're going to regret this one day. I felt the familiar twinge of guilt creeping in, but I shut it down quickly. I didn't owe them any explanations. They were playing the same game again, trying to make me feel responsible for everything. But I wasn't going to be manipulated again. I didn't respond. Instead, I blocked her number again. But I wasn't prepared for what came next. A few hours later, I received a message, not from them, but from a friend of mine. They'd seen something online. It was a GoFundMe link claiming my parents were in financial trouble. According to the description, they'd had some sort of medical emergency and were asking for money again. The message read, "Is this true? I thought you were done with them." I opened the link and felt my stomach drop. The story was a blatant lie. It claimed my parents had been involved in a car accident and that they were in dire need of funds for hospital bills. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. They were using the same tactics they had tried on me, but now they were trying to get strangers involved. They were once again playing the victim to get money. It made me sick. They hadn't even learned from the last time they tried to manipulate me. Now they were using people. I didn't know what to do, but I knew one thing. I wasn't going to let them win again. And that's when it hit me. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about making sure they faced the consequences of what they had done to me and everyone else. I stared at my phone, the GoFundMe page still open in front of me. The story was so exaggerated, so full of holes, that I couldn't believe anyone was buying it. But that's when it clicked. I needed to expose them for what they really were. I knew it wasn't going to be easy, and I knew I'd probably lose any chance of reconciliation, but what they had done was too far. They had crossed a line, not just with me, but with everyone they were trying to manipulate. I took a deep breath and began typing, "Hello everyone. These people are my parents. The story about the car accident is completely fabricated. My parents are not in any medical emergency. They are not in any financial trouble. This is just another attempt to scam people into giving them money under false pretenses. I can't stand by and let them keep doing this to others. They've spent years taking advantage of me, making me feel guilty for their mistakes, while my brother was allowed to live rent-free and treated like the golden child. They've played the victim for so long that I've had enough. I'm cutting contact with them for good. Please don't donate to this page. Instead, take this as a reminder that not everyone who asks for help is being honest. I've been the one who's had to work 2 jobs to support myself while they sat back and took advantage. It's time to stop letting people like them get away with this. I paused before clicking the send button. I thought about the consequences. I thought about how they would react. But I didn't hesitate. It was time for the world to know the truth. I posted it immediately. The notifications flooded in comments, messages, shares. People were starting to see through the facade. The GoFundMe page was bombarded with negative comments calling out my parents for their lies. Donations stopped pouring in, and within hours, the page was taken down for violating platform policies. I couldn't help but feel a small sense of relief. For once, I wasn't the one carrying the weight of their lies. The next morning, I woke up to a barrage of messages. Most of them were from friends, some offering support, others just shocked that I had exposed everything so publicly. But then there were the messages from them, my parents. Why did you do this? We raised you better than this. Do you have any idea what you've done? You're ruining everything. Jason even got involved, calling me up furious. Why are you doing this? Mom and Dad are in trouble and you're just making it worse. They've always been there for you. You're tearing the family apart. I didn't even respond to their messages. I didn't need to. I'd already made my choice. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had control over my own story. I wasn't going to let them dictate my happiness anymore. I wasn't going to be their emotional punching bag, their scapegoat. I had done the right thing, and now it was time to move on with my life. It didn't happen overnight, but slowly things started to fall into place. I was finally free. I focused on my career, spent time with friends who genuinely cared about me, and started living life the way I wanted to. As for my parents, they never reached out again. They probably never thought I'd have the guts to stand up to them, let alone expose them for what they really were. But I did. And honestly, I didn't care if I ever heard from them again. I had my peace, and that was all that mattered. What do you all think? Was I wrong for exposing them? Or did I finally take control of my own life? Let me know your thoughts. Now on to the next story. Story 7. My sister said this year's birthday was without children. Money's tight. I agreed. Then I saw her Facebook. Neighbors' kids, cousins' kids, a catered buffet, an animator, the whole family together. My son asked, "Wasn't there no party?" I snapped a picture of the envelope with their rent payment inside and sent it. Returned to sender. 40 minutes later, my dad was calling me over and over. 3 weeks before my mom's birthday, I got a text from my sister, Lisa. It was short and casual, like she was asking me to bring potato salad to a barbecue. Hey, just FYI, this year's birthday is going to be adults only. Kids are great, but money's tight and Mom just wants a chill night. Hope that's okay. No explanation, no apology, just a shrug of a text like it was some normal thing we always did. I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't the first time Lisa had said something that felt off, but this one hit different. I was standing in my kitchen when I read it. My son, Jake, was at the table finishing homework and Ellie was coloring on the floor beside the fridge. I looked at them and immediately thought, how am I going to explain this? Grandma's birthday was a tradition. They looked forward to it every year. The cake, the cousins, the chaos. Now, I was supposed to tell them it wasn't happening because money was tight. I almost asked for more details, but I didn't because Lisa had been living in my basement for 8 months. Rent-free. I covered groceries for 6 people now. Her daughter was enrolled in the same daycare as mine. I paid for that too. She borrowed my car. She used my Netflix, my Amazon, my everything. So, I figured if anyone had the right to be a little strapped, it was her. And if she said there wasn't a party this year, then fine. No party. I played along. I didn't mention it to the kids. I didn't even mention it to my wife until 2 days before when she asked what we were doing for Mom's birthday. I shrugged and told her the new excuse. Adults only, money tight, low-key. She raised an eyebrow, but we dropped it. We took the kids to the park instead and bought them ice cream. Saturday morning rolled around. I didn't think much of it until after lunch when I opened Facebook just to scroll a bit. There it was. Lisa had posted an album, 43 photos captioned, "Happy birthday to the best mom in the world." I clicked, already feeling a tightness in my stomach. First photo. My mom holding a mimosa and smiling in front of a big silver balloon arch. Second photo. A group shot: Lisa, Mom, Dad, 4 of our cousins, all their kids, and even the neighbor's toddler sitting on Lisa's lap. Third photo. A table overflowing with catered Italian food, trays of lasagna, chicken marsala, garlic knots, all from the restaurant that used to be my mom's birthday tradition before Lisa moved in. Fourth photo. A magician, a real one in a full sequin vest and everything, performing for a group of kids. Fifth photo. Lisa's daughter getting her face painted. Sixth photo. A bounce house in the yard. I kept scrolling. My stomach kept turning. There were over a dozen kids in those pictures and not one of them was mine. Jake walked up behind me while I was still looking at them. He leaned on my shoulder and squinted at the screen. Then he asked the question that snapped something clean in my brain. "Wasn't there no party?" I didn't say a word, just turned off the phone and stared out the window for a minute. After a few seconds, I stood up, walked downstairs to the office, opened my drawer, and pulled out the white envelope I always prepped for Lisa at the start of each month. Inside was $950, her rent. She never asked for it anymore. It just appeared in the same spot on the 5th every month like clockwork. Except now, I held it in my hand and didn't feel generosity. I felt like a damn idiot. I grabbed a Sharpie, crossed out her name, and wrote "Return to Sender" in huge black letters across the front. I took a photo and sent it to her. That was it. No text, no message, just a picture. 40 minutes later, my phone started buzzing. First Lisa, then Dad, then Lisa again, then a text from Dad. "What the hell is going on? Call me now." I let it ring. I knew exactly what was going on. The lie unraveled and I wasn't playing dumb anymore. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't going to make things easier for her. She had made her choices. Now I was going to make mine. I didn't answer any of the calls. Not Lisa's, not Dad's. I waited. 3 hours later, she finally texted, "Can you not be dramatic?" It was just easier without more kids. It wasn't a personal thing. Then 5 minutes after that. "Also, what does the rent envelope mean? Are you mad about something else?" I didn't respond. I was done explaining myself to people who had never once tried to understand me. Around 8 p.m., I heard the knock. I didn't even have to look. Lisa always knocked in sets of 3. I opened the door. She was standing there alone, arms crossed, wearing a t-shirt from the party. It had a giant glittery Mom's Birthday Bash 2025 logo across the front. I just stared at her. She started with a deep breath and that fake calm voice she used when she was about to lie. It was a small thing. Mom wanted to keep it low-key and it just got bigger than expected. You know how people are. It wasn't some big conspiracy against you. I asked one thing, just one. "Why did you tell me there was no party?" Her mouth opened and closed like she was trying to pick the right version of the lie. She finally landed on, "Because your kids are loud. They run around. Mom just wanted one day without that." I said nothing, just stood there. She added, "You're making a huge deal out of something that wasn't about you." And that was it right there. The thing that made everything click for me. This wasn't about the party. It wasn't even about my kids. It was about control. For 8 months, Lisa lived off me like it was owed to her. Rent, food, bills, all covered. I never asked her to pay me back. I never made her feel small for needing help. And still, she saw herself as the one who got to decide who mattered and who didn't. She took my help and used it to rebuild her life, but couldn't even spare a slice of cake for my children. So, I told her I wasn't paying for her life anymore. Rent was on her. If she wanted to live here another month, she'd have to cover it herself. She started laughing. I swear to God. She actually laughed in my face, said I was overreacting, said I was being petty, said I must be hating my life if this is what gets me mad. I stepped back and shut the door. Didn't say another word. The next morning, she was gone. Not fully, her stuff was still downstairs, but she wasn't home. I figured she was sulking at Mom's or maybe crashing at some friend's place. That night, my dad showed up. No warning. I was in the garage when I heard the front door open and my wife call out, "John, your dad's here." I came inside and he was standing there holding a six-pack like he thought this was just going to be a calm chat between men. He opened with, "You're not really going to kick your sister out over a birthday party, are you?" That was how he saw it, like I was throwing a tantrum. I asked him if he knew about the party. Of course he did. He was in half the pictures. He tried to act like he was just following Lisa's lead. "You know how your sister is," he said. "We didn't want drama." I asked if my kids were drama. He didn't answer that. Just said Lisa had enough on her plate already and it was unfair to pile more on her. I asked if they had any idea what I'd been doing for her all year. Again, no answer. Then he said something that stayed with me for the rest of the week. "She's family. You don't punish family for being flawed." I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I just nodded and walked back to the garage. That night, I changed the Wi-Fi password, disconnected her devices, canceled the DoorDash subscription she had been using, and stopped the auto transfer I had set up for her daughter's daycare. I didn't tell her. I just did it. The next morning, I heard her stomping around downstairs. She finally texted, "Did you shut off the internet?" Seriously. No reply. She went silent for 2 days. Then on Thursday, I came home from work and the basement was half empty. Her clothes were gone. Her daughter's toys were packed. Food was gone from the fridge. She didn't say goodbye. Didn't say thank you. She left one thing behind. The glittery birthday shirt crumpled on the couch. I should have felt relief. Instead, I just felt cold. I knew this wasn't over. Not even close. Lisa was quiet for a week after she left. No texts, no calls. I think she was expecting me to come crawling back. Maybe send some apology cash with a "let's not fight, we're family" message. That's how it always went before. She'd push too far, I'd get mad, then I'd feel guilty and fix it. Not this time. I kept the basement locked. My wife suggested we start cleaning it out, but I wanted to wait. Not because I thought Lisa was coming back, but because I needed to make sure this wasn't going to turn into a bigger storm. And I was right to wait. The storm came the following Sunday. We were sitting down for dinner when my mom called. I let it go to voicemail. Then she texted, "We need to talk. Please don't do this to your sister. She's having a hard enough time." I didn't answer. 10 minutes later, she sent another, "You're not cutting off your sister over cake." I set my phone face down and kept eating. My wife raised an eyebrow. I told her I'd explain later. By the time I tucked the kids into bed, I had 5 missed calls from my mom, 3 from my dad, and 1 from Lisa, her first since she left. I didn't answer any of them. The next morning, my dad showed up again. This time, he wasn't holding a six-pack. He looked pissed. He didn't even wait for an invitation. Just walked in like he still lived there. "We need to end this nonsense now," he said. I didn't say anything. "She's your sister. She needed help. You gave it. Great. But now you're turning into the enemy over a party. That's petty." I finally said what I'd been thinking for weeks. It wasn't just a party. It was a choice. She chose to leave my kids out of something they were supposed to be part of. She lied. She used me and you helped her. He blinked, then laughed like I was a joke. "You think you're the victim here? Lisa's got no job, no stability. You think this was easy for her? You think she planned some conspiracy?" I didn't answer. I just walked over to the drawer by the fridge and pulled out a folder. Inside was every receipt, every Venmo transfer, every auto payment I made for Lisa over the past 8 months. I dropped it on the counter. "Over $7,800. I said. "That's what I spent on someone who couldn't even let my son have a piece of birthday cake." He didn't touch the folder. "You're too angry to see clearly," he said. You're making this bigger than it is. I asked him one thing before he left. Did Mom know Jake and Ellie weren't invited? He hesitated, then nodded. She didn't want to say anything because she didn't want to upset you. That was the last straw. For years, my parents treated Lisa like she was made of glass and me like I was built to carry weight. Lisa gets grace, I get guilt. Lisa gets excuses, I get expectations. I told him to leave. That night, I changed the lock on the basement door and sent a locksmith to change the key on the old apartment Lisa used to have. The one I kept paying the rent on just in case she needed a backup. I canceled the account I set up for her daughter's college fund. I called the daycare and transferred the remaining credit to my daughter's account. I made it all clean and then I blocked Lisa on everything. I gave my parents one last chance. I sent them both a message. If you want to stay in my life, you respect my decisions. No more guilt. No more defending her. No more lies. My kids will never be excluded again. And if you think that's petty, then maybe we shouldn't talk for a while. My dad didn't reply. My mom said, "We raised you better than this." That was when I realized they didn't really know me at all. 2 days after I sent the final message to my parents, it was quiet. No calls, no texts. Felt eerie, like the calm after a storm you know isn't really over. My wife said, maybe this was a good thing. Maybe they finally got it. I wanted to believe that. I really did. Then on Thursday night, my doorbell rang. It was almost 10 p.m. I looked through the peephole and felt that old pit in my stomach again. It was my mom, alone, holding a casserole dish like we were living in some TV drama where comfort food fixed everything. I opened the door just enough to talk but didn't let her in. She asked if we could talk inside. I said no. She said she didn't want to fight, just wanted me to hear her out. She started slow, talking about families sticking together and how resentment can ruin generations. But after 5 minutes of that, she finally dropped the script and got to what she really came for. "She's staying with us now, Lisa," she said. "You left her no choice." I almost laughed. No choice. She'd had every choice. She just never thought I'd stop cleaning up after them. Then she said something that caught me completely off guard. She tried to get a job last week. She used your address on the application. The employer called for a background check and they found out about her eviction from last year. She lost the job offer. I was confused. What eviction? She looked uncomfortable. Last December, before she moved in with you, we helped her hide it. We thought she'd fix things once she was settled. She begged us not to tell you. Hadn't known. She told me she just needed a place for a month or two while she looked for something better. Said she had good references. Said she just needed to reset. I never questioned it. My mom went quiet again. Then, with the most bitter voice I've ever heard from her, she said, "You took everything from her, John." I was floored. I took everything. I paid her bills, fed her kid, gave up space in my own house for nearly a year. And the moment I stopped, suddenly I was the villain. I was the destroyer. That night after she left, I sat down with my wife and told her everything. Even the stuff I tried to keep from her during those earlier months. How Lisa once used my credit card without asking. How I found her daughter using Ellie's school tablet because Lisa never replaced the one her kid broke. How she guilted me into paying for a therapy appointment, then canceled it and used the money for concert tickets. My wife didn't even look surprised. She just said, "So, what are you going to do?" And I told her the truth. I'm not done yet. The next morning, I went online and pulled the records from the eviction. Lisa had used a fake reference to get that apartment in the first place. She listed me as a reference without telling me and used a number that routed to a prepaid phone she answered herself. That part one didn't care about. But what I did care about was finding out that she had an unpaid electric bill of $1,400 tied to my name. She'd used my info when she first moved in with me to set things up faster. I'd assumed it was just for internet. Turns out she switched the utilities into my name without telling me. She stopped paying the bill in July. I called the company. They said I was responsible. That was it. I spent the whole afternoon gathering every document, emails, texts, screenshots. I wasn't just cutting her off. I was protecting myself from whatever financial disaster she might drag me into next. But before I could even finish, I got an email. Subject: important message from Jackson Elementary, Jake's school. I opened it. Apparently, Lisa had tried to pick up Jake from school that afternoon. Told them I asked her to. Said she was helping while I was overwhelmed. The school called me immediately when she showed up, but I hadn't seen it because I'd been on the phone with the electric company. They didn't let her take him, thank God. But the fact that she even tried, that was it. There was no doubt anymore. She wasn't just selfish. She was dangerous. I called my lawyer that night and started the paperwork. Restraining order, form of financial dispute, documentation of unauthorized account use. The next time Lisa would see me, it wouldn't be at a birthday or a family dinner. It would be in court. The legal stuff moved faster than I expected. Maybe because my lawyer had seen this kind of thing before. Families turning into strangers overnight. He didn't flinch when I showed him the school pickup report or the electric bill. He just nodded, asked for copies, and told me what to expect. 2 days later, Lisa was served. She showed up at my door within the hour, screaming from the sidewalk. My kids were inside. I told her once, just once, to leave or I'd call the cops. She kept going louder, trying to bait me into coming outside. I closed the door. That night, my dad sent me a voicemail. Just one line: "We're not that kind of family, John." That stuck with me. Not because it was true, but because it was a lie he clearly believed. We were exactly that kind of family. The kind where loyalty was demanded, not earned. The kind where guilt was currency. The kind where the only rule was protect Lisa no matter what. I used to think I was the problem. Too rigid, too serious, not forgiving enough. Now I knew the truth. I was the only one not lying to myself. The next week was quiet. I think Lisa realized she couldn't touch me anymore, legally or emotionally. The school updated their list of authorized pickups. The electric company froze the account and agreed to remove my name after the documents were processed. But then my mom showed up again. No casserole this time, just her standing in the driveway, arms crossed. I didn't open the door. I spoke through the camera. She asked if I was really going through with the restraining order. I told her yes. She asked what I thought that would do to the family. And I finally said the thing I'd been holding back since this all started. Nothing. Because this family broke a long time ago. She stood there for a while, then said, "This isn't you. You're not cruel." That part hurt because I wasn't cruel. I was just done being the safety net. Done letting people weaponize my kindness. Done pretending that keeping the peace was more important than protecting my kids. I didn't hear from them again for a while until the Sunday after everything was filed. Jake was helping me wash the car. Ellie was riding her scooter. My wife was out shopping. It was a good, normal day. Then Jake asked me something out of the blue. "Is Grandma mad at me?" I stopped what I was doing. Asked him what made him think that. He said, "Because we didn't get to go to her party and now you don't talk to her." I told him no, that none of this was his fault. That sometimes grown-ups make bad choices. That sometimes people have to stay away from each other to stay safe. Then he asked the question I knew was coming. "Are we ever going to see her again?" I didn't answer because I didn't know. That night, I got a message from Lisa. Not through text or call. She sent a handwritten letter. It was shoved into our mailbox. No envelope, no stamp. Inside were 3 sentences. "You win. They're on your side now, too." I hope it was worth it. No apology, no accountability, just blame. I stared at those words for a long time. And then, for the first time in my life, I felt completely free. I kept the letter on my nightstand for a few days. Not because it meant anything, but because I wanted to remind myself what it took to finally let go. It was bitter and small and handwritten in the same handwriting Lisa used in high school when she forged Mom's signature on permission slips. Nothing had changed. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The paperwork went through. The restraining order was granted. Lisa was legally required to stay away from my house, my work, and my kids' school. The electric bill was officially transferred off my name. Her daughter's daycare account was closed out. It was over. The quiet that followed felt strange at first, like something was missing. But it wasn't peace that felt unfamiliar. It was the absence of crisis. The following Saturday, I got a call from my cousin, Ben. We hadn't spoken in almost a year. He said, "Hey man, just wanted to say I saw what happened. You did the right thing." That was it. No details, no drama. Just someone in the family acknowledging what everyone else pretended not to see. 2 days later, my aunt called to say she and my uncle were throwing a small birthday dinner for their son. She said, "You and the kids are absolutely invited. No politics, just family." That was the moment I realized how far this had rippled. Apparently, my parents had been telling people I cut everyone off over cake. Lisa had twisted the story to make herself the victim. Said I evicted a single mom and stole her support system. But some people knew the truth and others were starting to ask questions. Still, I didn't chase anyone down to defend myself. I wasn't building a case. I was building a life. The last straw came a week later. We were getting ready to leave for the birthday dinner when I saw it. A Facebook post from my mom, public. It said, "Some people don't know how to forgive, but I pray for them anyway, especially the ones raising children to do the same." That post stayed up for 3 hours. Then she took it down. I didn't reply, but I blocked her and Dad and Lisa. That night, after the kids went to bed, I deleted every photo of Lisa from my phone. I archived every message. I unfollowed every mutual friend who had been playing both sides. I closed the door. Not in anger, not in spite, in peace. That was the real revenge. Not screaming matches, not financial cutoffs, not even the legal paperwork. It was letting go. Letting go of the role they wrote for me. Letting go of the version of family where one person always had to lose for someone else to win. We didn't go back to how things were. We moved forward without them, and we were better for it. Now on to the next story. Story 8. I canceled my sister's wedding and sent her a bill for $21,500 after she mocked me and refused to invite me. She yelled, "You're a cheap and selfish coward." I just canceled the $3,000 rental payment and took back the car I had given her. She screamed for help, and then our parents intervened. I guess if I'm honest, I should have seen it coming. Amanda had always been the type to take and take until there was nothing left. But when it came to her wedding, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd be different. Family meant something, right? I was wrong. The second she got engaged, the circus started. Every call, every text was about what she needed. She needed help with the deposit for the venue. She needed help with her rent because she couldn't focus on wedding planning and work at the same time. She needed a better car to impress her future in-laws. And each time I said yes. Over the course of 8 months, I ended up paying $21,500 for her perfect little fantasy. Rent, a car, and a few emergency vendor bills that she swore she'd pay me back once she got her wedding presents. I didn't think twice. That's what you do for family. That's what I kept telling myself. I should have realized what was happening when she started leaving me out of things. No invitation to the engagement party. No mention when she went dress shopping. Then, 2 weeks before the wedding, she called me out of the blue. No small talk, no thanks, just a casual, "Hey, we're cutting the guest list a little bit. Nothing personal, but you don't have to come." I thought she was joking. I actually laughed until she said it again, this time slower, like I was stupid. I asked why, and she said, "Really, Kev? You're a cheap, selfish coward. You always have been. I can't have that kind of energy at my wedding." Cheap, after $21,500. Selfish, after co-signing half her life. Cowardly, because I didn't bend over backwards fast enough. I didn't say anything. I just hung up. I had to think. For the first time in my life, I allowed myself to really think about every time Amanda had humiliated me, used me, and tossed me aside like I was nothing, then expected me to smile about it. The night before her wedding, around 8 p.m., I sat down at my laptop and started pulling the strings. First, I canceled the $3,000 rent payment that was due the next morning. Without it, her landlord would demand the overdue balance by Monday. Then, I logged on to the insurance portal and removed her car from my policy. I sent a quick message to the dealership and flagged it as a repossession since it was still legally in my name. Car gone. Finally, I drafted a clean, formal bill for $21,500 and emailed it to her. No long explanation, no drama, just a simple note. Since I'm too cheap to party with you, I figured you'd want to pay your own way. She'd figure it out soon enough. It didn't even take an hour. My phone lit up so brightly it almost vibrated off the table. Amanda called, then texted, then called again. When I didn't answer, she showed up at my apartment, screaming my name from the sidewalk like she was under attack. Neighbors started sticking their heads out. Someone yelled at her to shut up. She just kept yelling, "You ruined my wedding. You owe me. Help." That's when Mom and Dad got involved. And that's when things went from messy to full-blown war. The night after Amanda screamed outside my apartment like she was being attacked, I thought maybe, just maybe, she'd calm down. I underestimated how far she was willing to go. Around midnight, the calls began. First it was Amanda, then Mom, then Dad. I didn't answer any of them. I just stared at my phone, which lit up every 2 minutes and vibrated so hard it almost fell off the table. They didn't leave voicemails. They didn't text explanations. Just one missed call after another, piling up like a threat. In the morning, they showed up in person. I heard them before I saw them. Amanda's screaming voice echoing down the hallway of my building, Mom crying, and Dad barking orders like he was leading a battalion. I didn't even get a chance to speak when I opened the door. Dad pushed his way halfway in, screaming about how I had disgraced the family. Amanda was red-faced and sobbing, spewing words about how I had ruined her life, embarrassed her in front of everyone, and ruined the best day she would ever have. Mom tried the guilt trip. "Kevin, you're tearing this family apart. Please, just fix it before it's too late. Fix it." Like I was the one who screwed up. I told them directly, calmly, for once, that I wasn't going to fix anything. Amanda was getting exactly what she deserved. I reminded her of the rent, the car, and the $21,500. I asked them point blank if helping her had ever been enough. No one had an answer. Dad tried another tactic. He said they would talk to Amanda, but I would have to reinstate the rent and return the car first so as not to make a scene. That's when I laughed loudly right in his face. For once, I wasn't the one being humiliated. I closed the door, locked it, closed the blinds, and sat down with a cup of coffee like it was any other Saturday. Amanda didn't give up. She took it to the next level. By noon, she had blasted me all over Facebook. A huge public post about how her jealous, selfish brother sabotaged her wedding out of spite and left her homeless and stranded. She even included a photo of her standing in the parking lot next to her packed belongings, crocodile tears streaming down her face. I didn't even have to respond. I had receipts. I posted them. Every bank transfer, every Venmo payment, every single dime I had put into her dream wedding. I added a simple caption, "Facts, feelings." It went viral in our small community. Friends from high school, old coworkers, and even Amanda's bridesmaids started chiming in. Some people unfriended me. Many more unfriended her. But the real blow came when some of the vendors saw the drama online. It turned out that Amanda had promised many of them that family would cover everything. Now, they weren't so sure. Several demanded payment in advance or canceled altogether. Amanda lost her hairdresser. Her caterer dropped out. One of the groomsmen backed out after his wife saw my posts and decided they weren't going to support scammers. By late afternoon, the wedding was still technically on, but it was bleeding fast. Dad called again. I didn't answer. Mom texted me and asked if we could please, for the sake of the family, sit down and have a civil conversation. I texted back, "When the $21,500 is in my account, we can talk." But Amanda wasn't done. When she realized she couldn't guilt me, couldn't shame me, and couldn't publicly destroy me, she went for the nuclear option. She brought in the rest of the family. And that's when it all exploded. By Sunday morning, I realized that Amanda hadn't just thrown a temper tantrum. She had declared a full-blown family war. The first wave hit at dawn. I awoke to nearly 80 unread messages. Some were just angry one-liners. "Shame on you? Family is everything. You make me sick." Others were long, drawn-out paragraphs about loyalty and blood being thicker than water. People I hadn't spoken to in years, cousins who lived across the country, and uncles who barely remembered my birthday were suddenly moralizing as if they knew something about what had happened. Amanda had spun a masterpiece. According to her, I had stolen her future. I had stolen her car to leave her stranded and cut off her payments out of sheer cruelty. She painted herself as this helpless victim who just wanted one good day after years of sacrifice. There was no mention of the money I spent, the favors I did, or the countless times I said yes when everyone else said no. The family bought it hook, line, and sinker. It wasn't just the messages, either. People started posting passive-aggressive quotes on Facebook. Family is supposed to lift each other up, not tear each other down. Or, some people show their true colors when you need them most. No one mentioned me directly, but it was obvious. They wanted me to see it. They wanted me to feel guilty. For about 5 minutes, I almost did. Then I remembered standing in Amanda's apartment months ago, handing her the keys to the car she wanted so badly, and hearing her say, "You're not as useless as I thought," like it was a compliment. That memory snapped me right back into place. Instead of firing back, I did something worse. I stayed silent. No explanations, no arguments, just screenshots. I gathered every bank statement, every wire transfer, and every Venmo transaction with her name attached. Then I sent a clean, cold email to every family member who had contacted me. Facts are not negotiable. $21,500. Car title attached. Rent receipts attached. If you still believe Amanda, that's on you. No anger, no drama, just proof. Then I turned off my phone and left it off for the rest of the day. The world outside my apartment was on fire. Amanda's wedding was falling apart faster than anyone could patch it up. First, the hairdresser canceled. Then the photographer who didn't want to deal with potential financial disputes. The DJ refused to show up without full cash payment. The caterers started asking for money up front. Amanda didn't have it. The wedding, which was supposed to be the event of the year, was moved to her fiancé's uncle's backyard. No flowers, no centerpieces. They strung up a few string lights and tossed folding chairs on the lawn. A few people still showed up, but half the bridal party bailed. Amanda ended up walking down a dirt path to a Bluetooth speaker that was playing the wedding march from a cell phone. From what I heard later, people were whispering about her the whole time. Not about how beautiful she was, but about what a mess it all was. Meanwhile, I spent the day doing absolutely nothing. I ate leftover pizza, watched stupid TV, and slept. That night, they tried again. Mom sent a message first. "No more pretending. Kevin, you've made your point. Please don't do this to your sister. It's gone too far." 10 minutes later, Dad wrote, less polite, "If you had any decency left, you'd fix what you broke." Neither mentioned the $21,500. Neither even offered to pay it back. In their minds, it was my duty to eat the loss, to save Amanda's reputation, and to fix what she broke. I didn't respond. I didn't even open the messages all the way through. I just stared at them until the screen went dark. The next morning, I found an envelope slipped under my door. Inside was a single piece of paper in Amanda's handwriting, sharp and angry. "You are dead to me. I hope you live to regret this." No apology. No ownership. Just blame. I stared at it for a long time. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even sad. All I felt was this heavy, cold clarity. They had made their choice, and now so had I. Amanda wasn't the only one getting cut off. But before I could really move on, there was one more round left in the fight. Dad wasn't finished. He thought he could twist the knife deeper. He had no idea how ready I was to burn the whole thing down. I thought after the wedding disaster, after the public humiliation, and after Amanda's angry note, they would back off. I figured even they had to see that the damage was done. I underestimated how desperate Dad was to save face. 2 days after the wedding, my landlord called. She sounded confused, almost ashamed. She said that my father had contacted her and tried to negotiate a buyout of my lease so that I could move back home and work things out with the family. He was actually trying to bribe my landlord to evict me. I sat there and listened, stunned for a second. Not because I was hurt. I wasn't. I was impressed by how low they were willing to go. I thanked her for telling me and promised her I wasn't going anywhere. Then I hung up the phone and started laughing. I guess if yelling and guilt didn't work, eviction was the next logical step. The next day, I received a certified letter, official looking with legal essay all over it. It wasn't from Amanda. It was from Dad. He threatened to sue me for emotional distress if I didn't publicly apologize to Amanda and withdraw the bill. He even included a draft of a Facebook post he wanted me to write, admitting that I had lied about helping her financially and that I was deeply sorry for my actions. They really thought they had me cornered. What they didn't realize was that I had already collected my own insurance policy. Every receipt, every email, and every text that Amanda had sent asking for money or thanking me after she got it. I had it all saved, time-stamped, and backed up twice. I even had screenshots of her bragging to her friends about how Kevin foots most of the bill because he's too much of a sucker to say no. I made a phone call, not to a lawyer, not to anyone in the family. I called a friend of mine from college who worked for a local news station. I didn't give her the whole story, just enough to get her interested. A family money dispute that ruined a wedding. She was all over it. I emailed her everything. Receipts, messages, the lawyer's letter. 2 days later, an article appeared online. When family weddings turn into family wars. It didn't name names, but anyone who knew us, anyone who followed the Facebook drama, would put 2 and 2 together. It painted a very different picture than the one Amanda had created. The article went viral, not globally, but enough that Amanda couldn't hide behind her lies anymore. Suddenly, all the relatives who had been sending me hate texts went silent. Dad never called again. The idea of suing for emotional distress disappeared overnight. Amanda deleted half her posts and set her profiles to private. And just like that, the family war was over. But not with a treaty, with a wall. I didn't block her. I didn't send any last messages. I just stopped. Cold. No birthdays, no holidays, no weddings, no funerals, no apologies, no second chances. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't bitter. I was free. And it had only cost me $21,500. For a while after the article blew up, it was like the whole family went underground. No phone calls, no texts, no comments, not even a birthday reminder. It was like I had been erased overnight. I thought I would feel angry or sad or guilty. Instead, I just felt a strange kind of peace. I hadn't realized how heavy it was to carry people who only showed up when they needed something. Now that weight was gone. I could breathe for the first time in my life. But peace never lasts when people like Amanda are involved. 3 weeks after the wedding, late on a Thursday night, someone knocked on my door. No yelling, no drama, just a simple knock. I wasn't expecting anyone. My first thought was that it must be a mistake, maybe a neighbor. I opened the door. It was my cousin Tyler. He looked different than the last time I'd seen him at a family barbecue, older, maybe tired. He was holding a 6-pack of beer like it was a white flag. Neither of us said anything at first. I just stepped aside and let him in. We sat on my beat-up couch and drank in silence. The old TV was playing reruns that no one was watching. Finally, Tyler spoke. "I just want you to know. I understand." I didn't answer. I just waited. He told me everything. How things had turned ugly quickly after the wedding. Amanda's husband, Brad, was apparently furious behind the scenes. Not about the wedding disaster, but about finding out that Amanda had lied to him, too. She told him that her generous brother had covered everything. She made it sound like her family was loaded and ready to take care of her for life. Brad's family, rich, conservative, and reputation-obsessed, had been watching closely. When they found out the truth, when they saw the article and the receipts, it was over. Within a week of the wedding, Brad had moved back in with his parents temporarily to think things over. Amanda was left in their tiny apartment with nothing but unpaid bills and a bunch of wedding gifts that nobody wanted anymore. But it didn't stop there. Dad's reputation took a hit, too. Clients began to pull away. Old friends stopped returning his phone calls. In a town where respect and family man status meant everything, trying to legally threaten your own son didn't go unnoticed. Deals he had been working on for months dried up overnight. His name wasn't welcome in places where it used to be automatic. And Mom, the master of pretending everything was perfect, had started telling friends they were taking some time for family healing, which everyone knew was code for falling apart. Tyler told me that cousins and aunts were quietly choosing sides now, and not many were choosing Amanda's. I sat there listening, sipping my beer, feeling nothing. No victory, no triumph, just this quiet confirmation that cutting her off had been the right move. Tyler finished his drink and got up. Before he left, he looked at me and said, "You're better off without her. We all are." Then he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him and the silence returned. I looked around my small apartment. Faded carpet, scuffed walls, old hand-me-down furniture. But no one was yelling at me. No one was lying. No one asked for more than I had to give. It was mine. It was ugly, small, beat up, and it was free. Weeks passed. The seasons began to change. Leaves turned and fell. Holidays came and went without a single message from anyone in the family. My phone stayed silent. My heart remained light. For the first time, I was building a life that didn't revolve around people who only cared about me when they needed something. I thought the chapter was closed. I thought the book was finished. I was wrong. Because one cold January morning, long after I had stopped expecting anything, a message popped up in my inbox. Not from Amanda, not from Dad, but from someone I never thought I'd hear from again. And they weren't writing to apologize. I hadn't thought about Amanda, Brad, or the rest of them in weeks. Life had finally gone quiet. The kind of quiet that comes after a storm has leveled everything. So when I saw the email one morning, I almost ignored it. The subject line was vague. "We need to talk." No name, no company, no hint. Out of habit, I opened it. It wasn't Amanda. It wasn't Dad. It was Brad. Short, clipped words, as if he didn't want to write more than necessary. "Amanda told me that you owe her money. She says some of it was mine, too. I expect an answer. If not, we'll take it to court." I sat back in my chair and stared at the screen. There it was again. That old family tactic. Threat first, truth later. They had learned nothing. I didn't respond right away. I let the email sit there for 2 days. Let him sweat. Let him wonder. Then, when I was ready, I replied, "Everything is documented. Amanda has the records. I suggest you review them before you make false claims." I attached a small zip file. Inside were PDFs of every payment, every signed note, and every message in which Amanda acknowledged that the money was a loan. Black and white. Unbreakable. I didn't say anything else. Less than an hour after I hit send, Brad blocked me. 2 weeks later, I heard from an old friend who was still talking to people back home. Brad had filed for divorce. Amanda hadn't even lasted 4 months. Apparently, when the money dried up and the sympathy ran out, so did Brad's patience. He moved back in with his parents. Amanda moved into Mom and Dad's condo, the same condo they had to buy after selling the house at a loss. The golden family everyone admired was gone, wiped off the map as if they had never existed. And me, staying in my same beat-up condo. No car payments, no surprise bills, no screaming phone calls in the middle of the night. I worked. I slept. I lived. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't Instagram-worthy. It was just mine. And for the first time, it was enough. One afternoon, maybe 6 months after it all happened, I was walking back from the grocery store, arms full of cheap takeout and a bottle of gas station wine, when my phone buzzed. An unknown number, no name. Normally, I would have let it go to voicemail, but for some reason, I answered it. Kevin. It was Tyler, my cousin, the last one to stand by me when everything fell apart. He sounded different, calmer. He asked if I wanted to have dinner sometime to catch up. I thought for a second about the quiet life I had built for myself, about how safe it felt now that I wasn't carrying the weight of people who never deserved it. Then I thought about Tyler, the one person who knocked on my door, sat on my couch, and told me the truth when it would have been easier to keep quiet. "Yeah," I said. "Let's do it." We met a week later at a dusty bar on the edge of town. Cheap wings, bad lighting, terrible music. It was perfect. We didn't talk about Amanda or Dad or any of it. We just sat there like normal people, 2 guys who had been through something and come out the better for it. Somewhere between the second beer and the 3rd round of wings, Tyler grinned and said, You know, you're the lucky one. I raised an eyebrow. You got out, he said. Not many of us do. He wasn't wrong. The $21,500. Gone forever. The family ties cleanly severed. The future I thought I was building with them dead. But in its place was something better, freedom. Real freedom. The kind you don't buy with a check or a favor or a hollow apology. The kind you earn by surviving. I left that bar that night with nothing but a half-empty wallet and a full heart. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. I wasn't waiting for the next favor, the next crisis, the next betrayal. I was just free. And I realized something as I walked under the broken streetlights to my car. Peace isn't free. It costs as much as your dignity, your patience, and sometimes $21,500. But when you finally pay it, it's worth every damn penny. Now on to the next story. Story 9. I called Dad selfish, and he kicked me out after he excluded me from a family vacation to Hawaii. I got angry and stopped paying bills, and now he's on the street because of Mom. I never thought I'd call my dad selfish. He's always been the kind of guy who demands respect just because he's the dad, but looking back, that one word, selfish, changed everything between us. It started about a month before my family's trip to Hawaii. I was on a video call with my mom, sister, and dad when they casually mentioned their plans. At first, I was excited because I thought we were all going together. They talked about beaches, luau's, and snorkeling, all the things I dreamed of doing. Then I noticed that no one was including me in the conversation. Wait, I asked, cutting them off. When are we leaving? The mood immediately changed. My mom's smile faltered, and Megan, my younger sister, looked away as if she suddenly found the wall behind me super interesting. My dad cleared his throat, and I knew something was wrong. Actually, he said, we didn't book a ticket for you. At first, I thought he was joking. What do you mean? Why not? My mom jumped in, trying to smooth things over. It's nothing like that. We just thought you'd be too busy with work. You know, with how much you've been doing lately, we didn't want to stress you out. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Sure, I was working a lot. I was working 2 jobs and saving up to move out. But it wasn't impossible to take time off. I told them that. I even said I could book my own flight if it was about the money. But my dad cut me off. It's not about that. We just thought it'd be easier this way. No offense, but it's a family vacation, and you've been so focused on other things lately. It's not like you can drop everything at the last minute. That doesn't make sense, I shot back. Why didn't you at least ask me first? We didn't think you wanted to go, he said with a shrug. It's no big deal. You'll survive. It's just a trip. Felt like a slap in the face. My own family was going on the vacation of a lifetime, and they didn't even consider including me. Not even an invitation. Megan looked uncomfortable. Like she wanted to say something but didn't know what to say. My mom mumbled something about how it would be easier not to have to work around my schedule. But I was stuck on what my dad said. You will survive. After that phone call, I sat in my apartment trying to convince myself that it wasn't as bad as it felt. Maybe there was more to the story. Maybe money was tighter than I thought and they were too embarrassed to say so. Or maybe they really thought I was too busy. I tried to give them the benefit of the doubt, but it didn't take the sting out of it. Then they went to Hawaii and I saw the pictures. There was nothing tight about their budget. My dad posted a photo of himself lounging at some fancy resort holding a cocktail with a little umbrella in it. Megan sent me a video of her swimming with sea turtles. My mom texted me a picture of the 3 of them smiling in front of a waterfall. No one even mentioned my absence. When they got back, I didn't want to bring it up right away. I thought I'd wait until they said something, gave me an explanation, something, but they didn't, at least not until dinner a week later, when Megan casually dropped something that changed everything. By the time they got back from Hawaii, I'd already decided not to ask about the trip. If they wanted to talk about it, fine, but I wasn't going to beg for details about a vacation they had deliberately shut me out of. The first few days were radio silence. Then my mom invited me over for dinner and said something about how it had been a while since we'd all sat down together. I thought it would be awkward, but I said yes. When I walked in, everything looked normal. My mom was setting the table, Megan was scrolling through her phone, and my dad was sitting on the couch watching a sports recap. No one seemed particularly upset or guilty, just their usual selves. Dinner started well. Small talk. Megan complained about school. My dad grumbled about a neighbor who parked too close to his driveway. No one mentioned Hawaii, and I wasn't going to. But then Megan started talking. "Oh my God, the snorkeling was so cool," she said out of nowhere, grinning as she turned to me. "You would have loved it. Really, the turtles got so close. I thought one was going to hit me." I froze. My fork clanked against my plate, and my mom shot her a look, but it was too late. "What was your favorite part?" Megan asked, obviously not reading the room. I didn't even know how to answer. My mom quickly jumped in. "Megan, let's not." "It's okay," I interrupted. "Megan, what was your dad's favorite part? Since he was the one who decided I wasn't coming?" My mom froze, but Megan didn't. She looked confused for half a second before blurting it out. "Oh yeah, Dad said he thought it would be less stressful without you. Like, he didn't mean it in a bad way, just, with your schedule and everything. He thought it would be easier not to have to worry about." "Megan!" my mom snapped, glaring at her. But I didn't care about my mom's reaction. All I could focus on was my dad, who was sitting there like nothing was happening, picking at his food. "You're unbelievable," I said, looking right at him. He finally looked up. "What's that supposed to mean? You didn't want me to go. You couldn't even say that to my face." I had to hear it secondhand at the dinner table. "That's pathetic." His face immediately turned red. "Watch your mouth. Don't talk to me like that." "No," I said, shaking my head. "You're being selfish. You didn't even think about how I would feel. You just wanted to have your little trip without me, and now you can't even admit it." That's when he lost it. He stood up so fast his chair scraped the floor. "You don't call your father selfish," he shouted. "You think you can talk to me like that in my house? If you don't like it, you can leave." Before I could answer, he stormed out of the room. A second later, I heard a door slam upstairs. I thought that was the end of it until he came back. This time, he had my things. One by one, he started throwing my clothes out the window, yelling that if I didn't respect him, I wasn't welcome. I stood there in shock for a second before I realized he meant it. My mom tried to stop him and Megan yelled at him to calm down, but he just kept going. So I left. That night, I packed up everything that hadn't already been thrown out, put it in my car, and drove to a friend's house. I was so angry I could barely think straight, but the one thing I knew for sure was that I was done. Done paying their bills, done paying for groceries, done sending Megan money for school stuff. If they wanted to pretend I wasn't part of the family, fine. They could do it without me. I had no idea how quickly that decision would blow up their whole world. The first thing I did the next morning was cancel every payment I had set up for them. I don't think my family realized how much I had been covering. For months, I'd been paying their electric bill, their water bill, even their internet. I helped Megan with her college textbooks and sent money whenever she needed something urgent. I wasn't rich by any means. I worked 2 jobs to make it possible, but I wanted to support her. Or at least I did. That morning, I logged into every account I could think of and cut them off. I canceled the automatic payments for their utilities and canceled the grocery delivery service I'd been paying for. I even cut off Megan's monthly allowance. Felt petty, but honestly, I didn't care. If my dad didn't want me in the family, fine. They could handle everything on their own. I didn't hear from them for the first week. I stayed at my friend Eric's house and tried to figure out my next move. Eric kept telling me I'd done the right thing, but I still questioned myself. I mean, it wasn't Megan's fault or even my mom's really. It was my dad's. Still, I didn't want to back down. Then the phone calls started. The first was from my mom. She left a voicemail, her tone much softer than I expected. "Hey, sweetie, we need to talk about the bills. I'm not sure what's going on, but the power company said they haven't received payment. Call me back. Okay?" I didn't. The next call came a day later. This time she sounded more stressed. "Listen, I don't know what's going on, but the water's been turned off. I thought you were still taking care of it. Call me as soon as you can." I ignored them too. By the end of the week, they'd lost patience. My dad called, and this time there was no sugarcoating. "You think this is funny?" he said, his voice sharp. "I know you're the one who stopped paying. Do you have any idea how irresponsible that is? You're screwing over your own family for what? A temper tantrum?" I let him rant for a while before I finally replied. "I'm not paying for anything anymore," I said. "Figure it out yourself." "You think we can just pull money out of thin air?" he shot back. "That's not my problem," I said, and hung up. A few days later, I got a text from Megan. She was the only one who didn't seem angry, just confused. "Hey, can we talk? Mom's really upset. Dad's not saying much, but things are kind of a mess around here. I'm not sure what's going on, but if it's about the trip, I'm sorry. I didn't know you weren't coming until it was already decided." This text hit me harder than I expected. I felt bad for her, but I still wasn't ready to move. Then, out of nowhere, my mom called again. I almost didn't answer, but something told me I should. Her voice was softer this time. "I kicked him out," she said. "What?" I asked, not sure if I heard her right. "Your father," she repeated. "I told him to leave. He's staying with your uncle for now, but he doesn't live here anymore." That threw me. My mom wasn't the kind of person to make big moves like that, especially against my dad. "What happened?" I finally asked. She sighed. "I told him what you said, that you weren't paying for anything anymore. And well, I realized that you've been keeping this house running. Not him. He hasn't contributed anything in years, and he still acts like he's in charge. I'm done with it." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to feel vindicated, like this was the justice my father deserved, but another part of me wasn't so sure. "You don't have to come back if you don't want to," my mother said. "But the door is open if you do. I just thought you should know that." I hung up, my head spinning. I had no idea how to feel about any of this, and I didn't realize it yet, but the fallout was far from over. I spent the rest of that day pacing around Eric's living room trying to process what my mom had told me. She had actually kicked my dad out. It didn't feel real. "Eric told me to go back home." "It sounds like your mom is trying to make things right," he said. "Maybe this is her way of showing you that she understands now." But I wasn't sure. It felt weird, like I'd won some twisted power struggle I hadn't even wanted to start. And honestly, I wasn't sure I wanted to go back. Not yet, anyway. Then Megan called. "Can you come over?" she asked. "I don't know, Meg. It's still a little—" I trailed off, trying to find the right word. "Look, I understand why you're mad, and I'm not saying you're wrong," she said. "But things are bad here. Mom is stressed and Dad is angry. He keeps blowing up her phone, saying she's ruining everything. I don't think she's taking it well." I sighed. "Fine. I'll come by tomorrow." When I got to the house, it felt like I was in a different place. The lights were dim and the living room was eerily quiet. My mother was in the kitchen staring at a pile of unpaid bills. Megan was on the couch and looked relieved to see me. "Thanks for coming," she said as she stood up. "Mom's—" "Well, you'll see." I walked into the kitchen and my mother looked up. She looked tired, older somehow. "Hey," I said. "You okay?" She forced a smile. "I'm fine. It's just everything feels like it's falling apart all at once." I looked at the bills on the table. The pile was bigger than I expected. Electricity, water, internet, and a bunch of others I didn't recognize. "I'm trying to keep up, but your dad never handled any of this," she admitted. "And now that he's gone, I realize how much we relied on you. I should have stepped in sooner. I'm sorry." It was the first time she'd ever apologized for anything related to the trip or the mess it had caused. And as much as I wanted to stay angry, I could see that she was really struggling. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I don't know yet," she said quietly. "Maybe I need to get more hours at work, or maybe I'll sell some stuff. I'll figure it out." It was hard to watch. I didn't regret cutting her off, but I hadn't expected things to spiral so quickly. And I certainly didn't expect my mom to be the one left picking up the pieces. That night, I stayed to help Megan with some school stuff and talked to my mom about how to budget everything. It wasn't easy, but I left feeling like maybe things would work out. Then, a week later, everything changed again. I was at work when I got a call from Megan. She sounded panicked. Did you talk to Dad? She asked. No, why? He's here, she said. He just showed up. He's yelling at Mom, saying he won't leave until she takes him back. Can you come over? My heart sank. I didn't want to deal with him, but I couldn't just ignore it. Yeah, I said. I'm on my way. As I pulled into the driveway, I could hear his voice from outside. He was in full rant mode, pacing the living room while my mom stood there with her arms crossed. You think you can just kick me out like I'm nothing? He yelled. After all I've done for this family. I stepped inside and his eyes immediately landed on me. Oh, look who decided to show up, he said. The big shot. Are you happy now? This is what you wanted, isn't it? I clenched my jaw but said nothing. I could feel the tension in the room, like everyone was waiting to see what I was going to do. Dad, I finally said, keeping my voice calm. You need to leave. He laughed bitterly. And who's going to make me? You? This is still my house. Not anymore, my mother said firmly. That seemed to push him over the edge. He started yelling again, saying things I won't repeat here. But before he could go any further, Megan stepped in. Stop it, she shouted, her voice shaking. You're acting crazy. Just go. For a moment he looked stunned, as if he couldn't believe she was siding against him. But then he grabbed his coat and stormed out, slamming the door behind him. The house was quiet after that, but it didn't feel like peace. It felt like the silence before something worse. After my dad stormed out that night, the tension in the house didn't go away. It just shifted. It was like everyone was holding their breath, waiting to see what would happen next. I ended up staying the night because Megan asked me to. She said she didn't feel safe with the way things were escalating. The next morning, I woke up to find my mom in the kitchen, already on the phone. I didn't need to hear the conversation to know who she was talking to. Her tone was sharp, and I caught snippets of legal rights and restraining order. Is he still bothering you? I asked as she hung up. She nodded and rubbed her temples. He called 6 times last night. Left voicemails, too. I didn't listen to all of them, but the ones I did. She trailed off, shaking her head. I didn't push. Instead, I asked, what did the lawyer say? She sighed. They said it's tricky. Since he hasn't actually done anything violent, it's hard to prove he's a threat. But they're helping me file for legal separation. Once that's in place, we'll have more options. That was when I realized how far this had gone. My parents had always had their problems, but I never thought it would come to this. I spent most of that day helping my mom get organized, sorting through paperwork, making lists of things to do. Megan hovered nearby, quiet and worried. I could tell she was trying to keep it together, but it wasn't easy. Then, around dinner time, the doorbell rang. We all froze. No one was expecting visitors, and after the scene the night before, we were all on edge. My mother peeked through the window and immediately stepped back, her face pale. It's him, she whispered. I stood up, my heart pounding. I'll take care of it. She hesitated but nodded and stepped aside. When I opened the door, my father was standing there looking disheveled. His shirt was wrinkled, his hair was messy, and he had this wild look in his eyes. I just want to talk, he said. You need to leave, I replied, keeping my voice calm. Listen to me, he snapped, coming closer. I know I messed up, okay? But this is my family. You can't just shut me out like this. Nobody's shutting you out, I said. You did this to yourself. Now go. For a moment I thought he was going to argue, but instead, he did something I didn't expect. He stepped back and pulled an envelope from his pocket. Fine, he said, pushing it into my hands. But you're going to regret this. All of you. Before I could say anything, he turned and walked away, disappearing down the street. I closed the door and looked at the envelope. My mom and Megan were watching from the hallway, their expressions a mix of curiosity and fear. What is it? My mom asked. I don't know, I said and opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper. It wasn't a letter or a threat, as I had half expected. It was a receipt for a life insurance policy. The beneficiary, my mother, Is this real? Megan asked, her voice barely above a whisper. My mom took the paper and quickly scanned it. Her face went pale again. It's real, she said. But I don't understand. Why would he give this to you? Neither of us had an answer, but something about it didn't sit right with me. And as it turned out, we had good reason to be suspicious. The life insurance policy sat on the kitchen table like a loaded gun. Neither of us knew what to make of it. My mom called the insurance company the next day, and they confirmed that the policy was real. My dad had been paying into it for years. It doesn't make sense, my mother said for the 100th time. Why would he do this? Is this some kind of guilt trip? I didn't have an answer. Neither did Megan. The more we tried to make sense of it, the less it made sense. Things stayed tense for the next week. My dad's phone calls slowed down, but they didn't stop altogether. Megan went back to school, my mom started picking up extra shifts, and I went back to Eric's place, trying to give them space while keeping an eye on things. Then I got the call. It was from my dad. Hey, he said. His voice was strangely calm, as if nothing had happened. Thought you should know I'm moving out of state. Got a job, some construction thing. Just wanted to say goodbye. I didn't know how to respond. Okay. Take care of your mom and sister, okay? He said. Then he hung up before I could say anything. I wasn't sure if I believed him, but a few days later, my mom got a letter from him that confirmed it. He said he moved his stuff out of my uncle's house and was on his way to Arizona. And just like that, he was gone. Felt surreal. After all the chaos, the yelling, the drama, he just left. We didn't know what to do at first. My mom kept waiting for him to show up, but weeks turned into months and we never heard from him again. In the meantime, we all began to pick up the pieces. My mom got a better-paying job and started paying the bills on her own. Megan started working part-time between classes to cover her own expenses. And me? I stayed out of their finances. I'd help if they really needed it, but I wasn't going to carry them like I used to. It wasn't easy, but something shifted in all of us. For the first time in years, everyone was standing on their own 2 feet. Months later, on a random Sunday, we all ended up at the house for dinner. It wasn't planned. I just stopped by to drop something off and Megan got home from school early. My mom cooked, we talked, and for the first time things felt normal. At some point, Megan brought up the trip to Hawaii. Crazy how much has changed since then, huh? She said. I laughed. Yeah, you actually pay for your own textbooks now. She threw a napkin at me and my mom rolled her eyes, but we all smiled. The funny thing is, I don't think any of us would have chosen for things to happen the way they did. But in the end, it worked out. My dad leaving forced all of us to grow in ways we hadn't before. Every man for himself, I guess. But somehow we're all better for it. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comment section. Thank you and see you in the next video.